the story of the Ligurians begins not with written records or heroic tales, but with fragments of pottery scattered across windswept hilltops and the subtle traces of ancient settlements carved into the unforgiving landscape of northwestern Italy. Archaeological excavations conducted throughout the 20th and 21st centuries have gradually illuminated the shadowy origins of a people who would eventually challenge Rome itself, revealing a complex tapestry of Bronze Age communities that flourished in one of Europe's most geographically challenging regions. The earliest substantial evidence of organised Ligurian settlement emerges from the Middle Bronze Age, approximately 1600 to 1300 BC, when communities began establishing permanent fortified positions across the Ligurian Alps and the narrow coastal strip that would later bear their name. These settlements, characterised by their strategic positioning on elevated terrain and sophisticated defensive arrangements, represent a marked departure from the scattered temporary encampments of earlier periods. Excavations at sites such as Monte Bagot in the Maritime Alps have revealed extensive networks of terraced settlements, complete with storage facilities, metalworking areas, and elaborate burial grounds that suggest a society already displaying considerable social stratification. The Castellaro culture, named after the distinctive hilltop fortifications that dot the Ligurian landscape, provides perhaps the most comprehensive window into early Ligurian society. These settlements, typically situated between 400 and 800 metres above sea level, were constructed with remarkable attention to both defensive capabilities and resource management. The Castellari themselves consisted of multiple concentric rings of stone walls, often incorporating natural rock formations to create nearly impregnable defensive positions. Within these fortified compounds, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of specialised craft production, including bronze working, pottery manufacture, and textile production using locally sourced materials. The material culture recovered from Castellaro sites reveals a society that was simultaneously insular and cosmopolitan. Local pottery traditions show clear continuity with earlier regional styles, yet imported artefacts from across the Mediterranean demonstrate extensive trade networks that connected Ligurian communities to the broader Bronze Age world. Amber beads from the Baltic, obsidian from Sardinia, and bronze implements displaying techniques characteristic of Central European metalworking traditions all appear in Ligurian archaeological contexts, suggesting that these mountain-dwelling peoples were far from isolated despite their challenging geographical circumstances. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from key Castellaro sites has established a chronological framework that spans nearly a millennium, from approximately 1400 BC to 500 BC, revealing remarkable cultural continuity across this extended period. The consistency of settlement patterns, defensive strategies, and material culture throughout this time span suggests that the Castellaro culture represents the direct ancestors of the historically attested Ligurian tribes that would later confront Roman expansion. The linguistic landscape of ancient Liguria presents an equally complex picture, one that has challenged scholars for generations and continues to yield new insights into the ethnic and cultural composition of early Ligurian populations. Unlike their Celtic, Italic and Germanic neighbours, the Ligurians appear to have spoken languages that belong to a pre-Indo-European substrate, representing some of the oldest linguistic traditions in Europe that survived into historical times. Analysis of place names throughout the traditional Ligurian territory reveals consistent patterns that distinguish Ligurian toponymy from surrounding Indo-European linguistic zones. Rivers, mountains and settlements bearing names with characteristic suffixes such as Asco, Aska, Usko and Osko appear concentrated in areas that correspond closely to the distribution of Castellaro culture archaeological sites. The persistence of these naming patterns through successive waves of Celtic, Roman, and later Germanic influence suggests that Ligurian linguistic traditions possessed remarkable resilience. likely reflecting the geographical isolation and defensive capabilities that characterize Ligurian society. Inscriptional evidence, though fragmentary, provides additional insight into Ligurian linguistic traditions. The famous Magra Valley inscriptions, discovered in the early 20th century, display a unique script that combines elements derived from Etruscan writing systems with distinctly local innovations. These brief texts, primarily consisting of personal names and dedicatory formulae, reveal a language that shares certain structural features with other pre-Indo-European Mediterranean languages, while maintaining its own distinctive characteristics. Recent computational linguistic analysis has identified potential cognates between preserved Ligurian terms and languages spoken in Sardinia, Corsica, and the Iberian Peninsula before Indo-European expansion. This research suggests that Ligurian may represent a survival of a much broader linguistic family that once extended across significant portions of Western Mediterranean Europe. The implications of this linguistic evidence extend far beyond simple questions of language classification, offering insights into prehistoric population movements and cultural exchanges that shaped the ancient Mediterranean world. Genetic studies conducted on skeletal remains from Ligurian archaeological sites have revolutionized understanding of the biological composition of ancient Ligurian populations. Mitochondrial DNA analysis reveals a complex pattern of ancestry that reflects multiple waves of population movement and cultural exchange spanning several millennia. The maternal lineages present in Bronze Age Ligurian samples show strong continuity with earlier Neolithic populations, suggesting that the development of distinctive Ligurian culture occurred primarily through in situ cultural evolution rather than wholesale population replacement. However, Y chromosome analysis tells a more complex story, revealing the presence of paternal lineages associated with both indigenous European hunter-gatherer populations and immigrant groups from the Eastern Mediterranean and Anatolia. This genetic evidence suggests that Ligurian society emerged through the integration of diverse population groups, with marriage patterns and social structures that facilitated the incorporation of newcomers while maintaining cultural continuity. Isotope analysis of teeth and bones from Ligurian burial sites has provided additional insights into population mobility and dietary practices. Strontium isotope ratios indicate that while most individuals spent their entire lives within relatively restricted geographical areas, a significant minority show evidence of long-distance movement, particularly among adult males. This pattern suggests that Ligurian society maintained extensive networks of exchange and interaction, despite the geographical barriers that characterized their homeland. The challenging environmental conditions that shaped early Ligurian society cannot be understood merely as obstacles to be overcome, but rather as fundamental factors that drove the development of distinctive cultural adaptations and social institutions. The Ligurian Alps, characterized by steep gradients, unstable geological conditions, and highly variable microclimates, demanded innovative approaches to settlement, agriculture, and resource management that would profoundly influence Ligurian society throughout its historical development. The limited availability of arable land in the mountainous Ligurian interior necessitated intensive agricultural techniques that maximize productivity from small plots while minimizing soil erosion and degradation. Archaeological evidence from terraced agricultural sites reveals sophisticated systems of water management, soil conservation, and crop rotation that allowed Ligurian communities to sustain relatively dense populations in areas that might otherwise support only scattered settlements. The coastal regions presented different but equally significant challenges. The narrow strip of relatively level land between the mountains and the sea was subject to periodic flooding, landslides, and seismic activity that required careful site selection and construction techniques. Ligurian coastal settlements typically incorporated elaborate drainage systems, earthquake-resistant construction methods, and flexible architectural designs that could be quickly rebuilt following natural disasters. The strategic position of Ligurian territory at the junction between the Italian peninsula, the Alpine passes, and the maritime routes of the Western Mediterranean created both opportunities and vulnerabilities that profoundly influenced Ligurian political and economic development. Control of the coastal routes connecting the Rhone Valley to central Italy provided Ligurian communities with access to trade networks spanning the entire Mediterranean, while simultaneously making them targets for ambitious neighbours seeking to secure these same commercial advantages. The mountain passes that connected the Po Valley to the Mediterranean coast represented another crucial strategic asset that Ligurian tribes would exploit throughout their history. These routes, though difficult and dangerous, provided the most direct connections between the emerging urban centres of northern Italy and the established commercial networks of the Mediterranean world. Ligurian control of these passes would eventually bring them into direct conflict with Roman expansion, but during the Bronze Age, it provided the foundation for the prosperity and cultural sophistication evident in Castellaro settlements. The maritime orientation of coastal Ligurian communities is clearly evident in archaeological remains from Bronze Age sites along the modern Italian and French Riviera. Harbour installations, shipbuilding facilities, and extensive deposits of imported goods demonstrate that Ligurian sailors and merchants were active participants in Mediterranean trade networks from an early date. The development of distinctive Ligurian shipbuilding traditions adapted to the specific conditions of the northwestern Mediterranean would eventually make Ligurian vessels and seamanship highly valued throughout the ancient world. The transition from Bronze to Iron Age technology around 800 BC marked a watershed moment in Ligurian development, catalysing the formation of the distinct tribal identities that would define Ligurian society for the next 5 centuries. This technological revolution coincided with significant population growth, territorial expansion, and the crystallization of political structures that transformed scattered Castellaro communities into formidable tribal confederations capable of projecting power across vast swaths of northwestern Italy and southeastern Gaul. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals a dramatic intensification of settlement activity, with new fortified sites appearing at strategic locations throughout traditional Ligurian territory, while existing settlements underwent substantial expansion and architectural enhancement. The adoption of iron technology enabled more efficient land clearance, agricultural tools, and weapons production, supporting larger populations and more complex social hierarchies. Excavations at sites such as Genua and the hilltop settlement of Oppidum Genuensium have yielded extensive ironworking facilities, complete with specialised furnaces, slag deposits, and tool manufacturing areas that demonstrate sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. The emergence of distinct tribal identities during this period appears closely linked to territorial control over specific geographical regions and their associated resources. The Apuani Confederation, centred in the rugged Apuan Alps between the Magra and Serchio rivers, controlled crucial marble quarries and mountain passes connecting the Tyrrhenian coast to the Po Valley. Archaeological surveys of Apuani territory have identified over 60 fortified sites, ranging from small watchtowers to massive oppida capable of housing several thousand inhabitants. The largest of these, Monte Sagro, occupied a commanding position overlooking the Carrara marble deposits and featured sophisticated defensive works including multiple circuit walls, underground cisterns, and strategically positioned ballistae platforms. The Apuani developed distinctive cultural practices that reflected their mountain environment and strategic position. Burial sites throughout their territory reveal a warrior culture that valued martial prowess and individual achievement. Grave goods from elite Apuani burials include elaborately decorated iron weapons, bronze armour elements, and imported luxury items that demonstrate extensive trade connections. The famous Pontremoli warrior burial, discovered in 1927, contained a complete panoply of iron weapons including a long sword, spear points, and a distinctive crested helmet that shows clear influences from both Etruscan and Celtic metalworking traditions. The Ingauni Confederation controlled the coastal region from the Vero River to approximately the modern city of Savona, encompassing some of the most fertile agricultural land in Ligurian territory, as well as excellent natural harbours. Unlike their mountain-dwelling neighbours, the Ingauni developed a mixed economy that combined agriculture, maritime trade, and specialised craft production. Excavations at Albintamilium have revealed extensive evidence of olive oil and wine production facilities, suggesting that the Ingauni successfully adapted Mediterranean agricultural techniques to their coastal environment. Ingauni material culture displays strong Greek influences, reflecting their active participation in Western Mediterranean trade networks. Pottery assemblages from Ingauni sites include significant quantities of Greek amphorae, fine tableware, and storage vessels that indicate regular commercial contact with Massalia and other Greek colonies. The Ingauni also developed their own ceramic traditions, producing distinctive storage jars and cooking vessels that combined Greek technical innovations with local decorative motifs derived from earlier Castellaro traditions. The political organisation of Ingauni society appears to have been more centralised than that of their mountain neighbours, with archaeological evidence suggesting the existence of a paramount chief or council based at the coastal stronghold of Albium Ingornum. This site, strategically positioned at the mouth of the Center River, controlled access to interior valleys while maintaining direct maritime connections to the broader Mediterranean world. Fortification walls at Albium Ingornum incorporated advanced Greek siege defence techniques, including projecting towers, multiple gates with complex approach routes, and sophisticated water supply systems. The Intermelli Confederation occupied the easternmost portion of Ligurian territory, controlling the coastal region around modern Monaco and extending inland to control crucial alpine passes. The Intermelli developed particularly close relationships with Celtic tribes north of the Alps, as evidenced by the presence of Latene period artefacts in their archaeological assemblages and the adoption of certain Celtic military techniques and social customs. Excavations at Seminellum have revealed a complex urban centre that served as both a commercial hub and military stronghold, featuring elaborate residential quarters, craft production areas, and ceremonial spaces. Intermelli society appears to have been organised around warrior bands that combined traditional Ligurian defensive strategies with Celtic offensive tactics. Weapon deposits from Intermelli sites include distinctively Celtic longswords, alongside traditional Ligurian javelins and slings, suggesting a military culture that successfully integrated diverse tactical traditions. The famous Trophée des Alpes, though erected much later by Roman forces, commemorates victories over numerous Intermellii sub-tribes, indicating a complex political structure with multiple semi-autonomous groups acknowledging common leadership. Beyond these major confederations, numerous smaller tribal groups occupied specific valleys and coastal enclaves throughout Ligurian territory. The Torini controlled the approaches to the western alpine passes around modern Turin, while the Salassi dominated the strategic Aosta Valley. Each group developed distinctive material cultures that reflected their particular environmental circumstances and external contacts, yet all maintained recognisably Ligurian characteristics in their settlement patterns, defensive strategies, and social organisation. The evolution of Ligurian material culture during the Iron Age reveals a society that successfully balanced innovation with tradition, adopting new technologies and artistic styles while maintaining distinctive regional characteristics. Pottery production underwent significant changes during this period, with local workshops developing new forms and decorative techniques that combine traditional Ligurian motifs with influences from Greek, Etruscan, and Celtic sources. The characteristic Ligurian storage jars of this period, with their distinctive rim profiles and geometric decorations, appear throughout the Western Mediterranean, indicating that Ligurian ceramic products had achieved recognition for their quality and functionality. Metalworking techniques also evolved significantly during the Iron Age, with Ligurian smiths developing specialized tools and weapons that reflected their unique military and economic needs. The distinctive Ligurian javelin, with its barbed iron point and fire-hardened wooden shaft, became renowned throughout the ancient world for its effectiveness in mountain warfare. Archaeological analysis of these weapons reveals sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, with carefully controlled carbon content in the iron points and elaborate tempering techniques that maximised both hardness and flexibility. The construction of oppida during this period represents perhaps the most impressive achievement of Iron Age Ligurian society. These fortified settlements, typically positioned on elevated terrain with commanding views of surrounding territory, incorporated advanced defensive technologies with sophisticated urban planning. The oppidum at Monte Begua, overlooking the Ligurian coast between Genoa and Savona, featured multiple defensive circuits with a total length exceeding 3 kilometres, internal street systems laid out according to systematic plans, and specialised quarters for different crafts and social groups. Archaeological investigation of these oppida has revealed complex construction techniques that maximise defensive capabilities while providing comfortable living conditions for substantial populations. Walls were typically constructed using the emplekton technique, with outer faces of carefully fitted stone blocks, enclosing rubble and earth cores that could absorb siege engine impacts without collapsing. Internal buildings were constructed using timber frame techniques that provided flexibility during earthquakes, while supporting multi-storey structures. The development of extensive trade networks during the Iron Age transformed Ligurian society from a collection of isolated mountain communities into active participants in Mediterranean-wide commercial systems. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that Ligurian merchants established trading posts throughout the western Mediterranean, with Ligurian pottery and metalwork appearing in archaeological contexts from southern Spain to the Greek colonies of Sicily. These trade relationships facilitated not only economic exchange, but also the transmission of technological innovations, artistic styles, and political ideas that profoundly influenced Ligurian cultural development. The relationship between Ligurian tribes and their Etruscan neighbours was particularly significant during this period. Etruscan expansion into the Po Valley brought Etruscan traders and colonists into direct contact with Ligurian communities, creating opportunities for cultural exchange and technological transfer. Etruscan influence is clearly visible in Ligurian metalworking techniques, urban planning concepts, and religious practices, while Ligurian military techniques and mountain warfare expertise appear to have been adopted by Etruscan forces operating in difficult terrain. Greek colonization of the western Mediterranean coast also profoundly impacted Ligurian development. The establishment of Massalia around 600 BC created new commercial opportunities for Ligurian tribes while also introducing Greek political concepts, artistic traditions, and technological innovations. Greek influence was particularly strong among coastal Ligurian tribes, who adopted Greek pottery styles, architectural techniques, and agricultural practices while maintaining their distinctive cultural identity. Celtic expansion into northern Italy during the 4th and 3rd centuries BC created both challenges and opportunities for Ligurian tribes. Celtic military pressure forced some Ligurian groups to relocate or reorganize their territorial holdings, while simultaneously providing opportunities for military alliances and cultural exchange. The adoption of Celtic military equipment and tactics by some Ligurian tribes enhanced their military capabilities, while Celtic influence on Ligurian artistic traditions produced distinctive hybrid styles that combined Celtic decorative motifs with traditional Ligurian forms. The social organisation of Iron Age Ligurian society reveals a complex hierarchy based on military prowess, economic success, and religious authority. Elite burials from this period contain elaborate grave goods that demonstrate significant wealth accumulation and social stratification. The Zignago princely burial, discovered in the Magra Valley, contained over 200 individual artifacts including gold jewellery, decorated weapons, imported ceramics, and bronze vessels that represent the accumulated wealth of several generations. Warrior societies appear to have played central roles in Ligurian political organisation, with archaeological evidence suggesting the existence of age-grade military organisations similar to those documented among contemporary Celtic and Germanic tribes. Young men underwent initiation ceremonies that involved both military training and religious instruction, preparing them for roles as warriors and community leaders. The prevalence of weapon deposits at sacred sites throughout Ligurian territory suggests that military service was closely integrated with religious observance and community identity. Tribal assemblies provided mechanisms for collective decision-making and dispute resolution, with archaeological evidence from large gathering sites indicating regular meetings that brought together representatives from multiple communities. These assemblies appear to have combined political functions with religious ceremonies and commercial activities, creating opportunities for social interaction and cultural exchange that helped maintain tribal cohesion across dispersed territories. Religious practices centered on natural sacred sites that reflected the Ligurian connection to their challenging mountain environment. High-altitude sanctuaries, sacred groves, and spring-fed pools served as focal points for community religious activities and intertribal gatherings. The Monte Bagos Sanctuary Complex, with its thousands of Bronze Age and Iron Age rock carvings, continued to serve as a major pilgrimage destination throughout the Iron Age, attracting visitors from throughout Ligurian territory and beyond. These religious sites also served important political functions, providing neutral ground for diplomatic negotiations and treaty ceremonies that help maintain peace between potentially hostile tribal groups. The maritime horizons that had long defined Ligurian commercial networks expanded dramatically during the 6th century BC, when Greek vessels flying the dolphin banners of Massalia first established regular trading contacts along the Ligurian coast. These initial encounters between Ligurian tribal confederations and Greek colonists mark the beginning of a transformative period that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of Ligurian civilization, introducing Mediterranean urban concepts, monetary systems, and political structures that coastal communities would adapt to their own distinctive cultural frameworks. The Phocaean Greeks who founded Massalia around 600 BC brought with them not merely commercial ambitions, but a comprehensive package of Mediterranean civilization that included advanced shipbuilding techniques, standardized weights and measures, alphabetic writing systems, and sophisticated urban planning concepts. Their initial contacts with Ligurian communities focused primarily on securing reliable sources of raw materials that were scarce in the eastern Mediterranean, high-quality timber for shipbuilding, metals from alpine mining operations, and the distinctive Ligurian amber that had achieved recognition throughout the Greek world for its exceptional clarity and electrical properties. Archaeological evidence from the Portus Lunae region reveals the establishment of Greek trading posts that operated under agreements with local Apuani chieftains, creating permanent commercial installations that served as cultural transmission points between Greek and Ligurian societies. These facilities included warehouses constructed using Greek architectural techniques but adapted to local seismic conditions, residential quarters for permanent Greek merchants and their families, and workshop areas where Greek craftsmen worked alongside Ligurian artisans to produce hybrid goods that combined Mediterranean technical sophistication with regional aesthetic preferences. The impact of these Greek commercial establishments extended far beyond simple trade relationships. Ligurian communities that had previously relied on barter systems and gift exchanges began adopting standardized measures and, eventually, coinage that facilitated more complex commercial relationships. The earliest coins found in Ligurian archaeological contexts date to approximately 530 BC and include both Greek issues from Massalia and locally produced imitations that maintained Greek weight standards, while incorporating distinctively Ligurian iconographic elements such as stylized mountain peaks and tribal symbols. Greek influence on Ligurian material culture became particularly evident in ceramic production, where local workshops began producing vessels that combined traditional Ligurian forms with Greek decorative techniques and firing methods. The distinctive red figure pottery that emerged from Ingauni workshops during this period displays sophisticated understanding of Greek artistic conventions while maintaining functional characteristics adapted to Ligurian cooking and storage requirements. These hybrid ceramics achieved wide distribution throughout the Western Mediterranean, indicating that Ligurian potters had successfully integrated Greek technical innovations into commercially viable products. The adoption of alphabetic writing systems among coastal Ligurian communities represents perhaps the most significant cultural transformation of this period. Inscriptions from Albintamilium and other Ingauni centres demonstrate that educated Ligurians were using adapted Greek scripts to record commercial transactions, legal agreements and dedicatory inscriptions by the early 5th century BC. These texts reveal a society in transition, with traditional Ligurian naming conventions and legal concepts being recorded using Mediterranean administrative practices. The relationship between Ligurian tribes and expanding Etruscan city-states developed along markedly different lines, characterised by alternating periods of military conflict and diplomatic accommodation that reflected the complex territorial and commercial interests at stake in northern Italy. Etruscan expansion into the Po Valley during the 6th and 5th centuries BC brought Etruscan armies into direct contact with Ligurian mountain strongholds, creating a dynamic frontier zone where military prowess, diplomatic skill, and economic opportunity intersected in complex patterns. The Taurini Confederation found itself particularly affected by Etruscan expansion, as Etruscan colonies established along the Po River sought to control the alpine passes that provided access to Celtic territories beyond the mountains. Archaeological evidence from the Turin area reveals a series of fortified positions that changed hands multiple times during the 5th century BC, with construction techniques and artifact assemblages indicating alternating periods of Ligurian, Etruscan, and mixed occupation. The strategic importance of these positions is evident in the substantial resources invested in their fortification, with walls reaching heights of over 8 metres and incorporating advanced siege defence features derived from both Etruscan and Greek military engineering. Military conflicts between Ligurian and Etruscan forces appear to have been characterised by contrasting tactical approaches that reflected their different geographical and cultural backgrounds. Etruscan armies, organised along Mediterranean urban lines with heavy infantry formations supported by cavalry units, proved effective in open terrain but struggled against Ligurian guerrilla tactics in mountainous regions. Ligurian forces exploited their superior knowledge of local terrain and their traditional emphasis on mobility and missile weapons to conduct highly effective harassment campaigns that prevented Etruscan forces from establishing permanent control over disputed territories. These military encounters also facilitated significant cultural exchange, with both sides adopting successful techniques from their opponents. Etruscan influence on Ligurian military equipment is clearly visible in archaeological assemblages from this period, which include bronze armour elements, standardised weapon types, and siege equipment that reflect Etruscan manufacturing techniques adapted to Ligurian tactical requirements. The distinctive Ligurian-Etruscan hybrid helmets found at several mountain sites combine Etruscan bronze working expertise with Ligurian design preferences for enhanced peripheral vision and reduced weight. Religious practices provide another area where Etruscan influence profoundly impacted Ligurian culture. The adoption of Etruscan divination techniques, temple construction methods, and funerary practices created syncretic religious traditions that combined traditional Ligurian nature worship with Mediterranean urban religious concepts. The sanctuary complex at Luni displays clear evidence of Etruscan architectural influence in its temple foundations and altar arrangements, while maintaining traditional Ligurian sacred groves and spring-fed pools within the same ceremonial precinct. The emergence of Ligurian mercenary companies during this period reflects both the military reputation that Ligurian warriors had achieved throughout the Mediterranean world and the economic opportunities that military service provided for communities with limited agricultural resources. References in Greek and Etruscan sources indicate that Ligurian mercenaries were serving in conflicts throughout the western Mediterranean by the early 5th century BC, with their skills as light infantry, mountain fighters, and naval personnel making them particularly valuable to employers operating in difficult terrain or maritime environments. Ligurian mercenary service appears to have been organised along tribal lines, with entire warrior bands contracting their services under the leadership of traditional chiefs who maintained authority over their followers regardless of their geographical location. This system allowed Ligurian communities to maintain cultural cohesion while generating substantial income from military service, with returning veterans bringing back not only wealth but also knowledge of foreign military techniques, political systems, and cultural practices that enriched their home communities. The reputation of the Ligurian warriors as skilled sailors and naval fighters led to their recruitment by various Mediterranean powers seeking to enhance their maritime capabilities. Ligurian naval techniques, developed through centuries of coastal navigation in the challenging waters of the northwestern Mediterranean, included specialised ship designs adapted for both military and commercial purposes. These vessels, characterised by their shallow draft, enhanced manoeuvrability and robust construction, proved particularly effective in coastal warfare and amphibious operations. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks off the Ligurian coast reveals the sophisticated nature of Ligurian naval technology during this period. The Albenga wreck, dating to approximately 450 BC, contained a Ligurian-built vessel that incorporated advanced hull construction techniques derived from Greek shipbuilding traditions while maintaining distinctive design features that reflected Ligurian maritime experience. The cargo included amphorae from multiple Mediterranean production centres, indicating that Ligurian merchants were operating extensive trade networks that connected diverse cultural regions. The development of proto-urban centres along the Ligurian coast during this period represents a fundamental transformation in settlement patterns that reflected both internal social evolution and external cultural influences. These emerging urban centres differed significantly from traditional Ligurian oppidar in their organisation, with planned street systems, specialised districts for different activities, and public spaces that facilitated community gatherings and commercial activities. Genoa emerged as the most significant of these proto-urban centres, occupying a strategic position that controlled both maritime access to the northwestern Mediterranean and overland routes connecting the coast to interior valleys. Archaeological excavations in the historic centre of Genoa have revealed substantial 5th century BC occupation levels that include evidence of planned urban development, with residential quarters, craft production areas, and commercial districts organised according to systematic principles derived from Greek urban planning concepts, but adapted to local topographical constraints. The harbour facilities at Genoa during this period incorporated advanced Mediterranean engineering techniques, including constructed breakwaters, dredged channels, and specialised loading facilities that could accommodate the larger merchant vessels that were becoming standard in Mediterranean trade. These installations required substantial community investment and sophisticated organisational capabilities, indicating that Genoa had developed political and economic institutions capable of coordinating complex public works projects. The adoption of Mediterranean monetary systems by coastal Ligurian communities facilitated more sophisticated commercial relationships, while also enabling new forms of social organisation and political control. The earliest Ligurian coins, produced at mints in Genua and other coastal centres, maintained Greek weight standards while incorporating distinctive iconographic elements that reflected local cultural values and political identities. These coins typically featured maritime symbols such as dolphins and tridents, alongside traditional Ligurian motifs, including stylized mountain peaks and tribal emblems. The introduction of coinage had profound implications for Ligurian social organisation, enabling the accumulation and transfer of wealth in standardized forms that facilitated both local commerce and long-distance trade. Archaeological evidence suggests that coastal Ligurian communities developed increasingly sophisticated financial institutions during this period, including money-changing operations, credit arrangements, and investment partnerships that supported expanded commercial activities. The gradual adoption of Mediterranean writing systems among Ligurian communities created new possibilities for record-keeping, legal documentation, and cultural expression that transformed traditional oral-based social institutions. Inscriptions from this period reveal the emergence of written legal codes that combine traditional Ligurian customary law with Mediterranean legal concepts, creating hybrid legal systems that could address the complex issues arising from increased cultural contact and commercial activity. Educational practices also evolved during this period, with evidence suggesting that coastal Ligurian communities established schools where young people could learn Greek and Etruscan languages alongside traditional Ligurian cultural knowledge. These educational institutions served not only practical commercial purposes, but also facilitated the cultural integration necessary for Ligurian communities to participate effectively in the broader Mediterranean world, while maintaining their distinctive cultural identity. The technological innovations introduced through contact with Greek and Etruscan civilizations had far-reaching impacts on Ligurian agricultural practices, craft production, and daily life. Advanced metallurgical techniques enabled the production of more efficient agricultural tools, while new crop varieties and cultivation methods increased agricultural productivity in the limited arable land available to coastal communities. The introduction of the potter's wheel revolutionized ceramic production, enabling the manufacture of more standardized and technically sophisticated vessels that could compete effectively in Mediterranean markets. Construction techniques also underwent significant evolution during this period, with traditional Ligurian building methods being enhanced through the adoption of Mediterranean architectural principles. The use of mortar, advanced stone-cutting techniques, and systematic architectural planning created more durable and comfortable structures, while maintaining adaptations to local environmental conditions such as seismic activity and steep terrain. The expansion of Roman power beyond the Italian peninsula during the 3rd century BC inevitably brought Roman legions into contact with the fiercely independent Ligurian confederations that controlled the crucial coastal routes and Alpine passes connecting Italy to Gaul and Iberia. What began as sporadic border skirmishes in 238 BC would escalate into nearly 6 decades of brutal mountain warfare that tested Roman military doctrine, strained imperial resources, and demonstrated the remarkable tenacity of Ligurian resistance to foreign domination. The initial Roman campaigns against the Ligurians emerged from strategic necessities rather than territorial ambitions. Following their victory over Carthage in the First Punic War, Roman forces required secure overland routes to their newly acquired territories in Iberia, while Gallic raids into the Po Valley demanded military responses that brought Roman armies into direct contact with Ligurian mountain strongholds. The consul Marcus Aemilius Lepidus launched the first systematic Roman offensive against the Apuani in 238 BC, leading 2 legions along the coastal route toward the Magra Valley in what Roman commanders anticipated would be a straightforward pacification campaign. The Apuani response to this initial Roman probe revealed the sophisticated defensive strategies that would characterize Ligurian resistance throughout the subsequent decades of warfare. Rather than meeting Roman forces in open battle where legionary discipline and equipment provided decisive advantages, Apuani warbands conducted coordinated harassment campaigns that exploited their intimate knowledge of mountain terrain to devastating effect. Roman supply columns advancing through narrow valley passes found themselves subjected to continuous missile attacks from concealed positions on surrounding heights, while attempts to storm Apuani fortifications resulted in heavy casualties with minimal territorial gains. The terrain of the Apuan Alps itself became perhaps the most formidable opponent Roman forces encountered during these campaigns. Steep-sided valleys channeled advancing armies into predictable routes that Ligurian defenders could easily monitor and obstruct, while the complex network of mountain paths known only to local guides enabled Apuani forces to appear unexpectedly at vulnerable points along Roman lines of communication. Weather conditions added another layer of difficulty, with sudden mountain storms, dense fog, and seasonal snow creating operational challenges that Roman commanders trained in Mediterranean warfare were ill-equipped to address. Ligurian military tactics during this period demonstrated remarkable sophistication in their adaptation of traditional mountain warfare techniques to counter Roman military advantages. Apuani warriors specialised in lightning-fast raids that struck Roman camps during the pre-dawn hours, when visibility was limited and sentries were least alert. These attacks typically focused on destroying supplies, capturing pack animals, and inflicting casualties on isolated detachments, rather than attempting to engage main Roman formations in decisive combat. The psychological impact of these constant threats proved as significant as their material effects, forcing Roman soldiers to maintain constant vigilance that gradually eroded unit cohesion and morale. The construction and defence of mountain fortifications represented another area where Ligurian military engineering proved superior to Roman siege techniques during the early phases of the conflict. Apuani strongholds typically incorporated multiple defensive lines that took advantage of natural rock formations, with each successive position designed to channel attacking forces into carefully prepared killing zones. The fortress of Monte Marcello, commanding the approaches to the Magra Valley, featured a series of terraced defensive positions that required attackers to advance uphill across open ground, while subjected to concentrated missile fire from multiple directions. Roman siege equipment proved largely ineffective against these mountain fortifications due to the difficulty of transporting heavy machinery across difficult terrain and the inability to establish stable firing positions on steep slopes. Battering rams and siege towers that had proven decisive against urban fortifications in the Mediterranean became liabilities in mountain warfare, where their weight and bulk made them vulnerable to destruction by rolling boulders and incendiary devices deployed from higher elevations. The famous siege of Apua itself in 235 BC demonstrated these limitations when Roman engineers spent 3 months attempting to breach walls that Ligurian defenders continuously repaired during nighttime operations. The naval dimension of Ligurian resistance added another layer of complexity to Roman military operations along the coast. Ligurian vessels, designed specifically for the challenging conditions of the northwestern Mediterranean, proved capable of conducting effective raids against Roman supply ships and coastal installations. These attacks typically employed fast, shallow-draft vessels that could approach target areas through rocky coastal waters where larger Roman warships could not safely operate, then withdraw rapidly to concealed harbours among the numerous inlets and islands that characterised the Ligurian coast. The port of Luna, established by Roman forces in 227 BC as a forward supply base for operations against the Apuani, came under continuous pressure from Ligurian naval raids that demonstrated the sophisticated coordination between land and sea-based resistance forces. Ingani naval squadrons operating from bases near modern Albenga conducted coordinated attacks that combined amphibious landings with simultaneous assaults by land-based forces, creating complex tactical situations that stretched Roman defensive resources and required constant vigilance along extended coastal frontiers. Marcus Claudius Marcellus assumed command of Roman operations against the Ligurians in 225 BC with explicit instructions to bring the mountain campaigns to a decisive conclusion. Marcellus, whose previous military experience included successful operations against Celtic forces in northern Italy, initially attempted to apply conventional Roman tactical doctrine to Ligurian warfare through the construction of fortified camps and systematic advance techniques that had proven effective in previous campaigns. The results of these early operations under Marcellus demonstrated the inadequacy of standard Roman approaches to mountain warfare, with Ligurian forces consistently avoiding decisive engagements while inflicting steady casualties on Roman forces through harassment tactics. The adaptation of Roman military techniques to mountain warfare conditions required fundamental changes in unit organisation, equipment, and tactical doctrine that challenged traditional legionary training and command structures. Marcellus pioneered the use of smaller, more mobile formations that could operate effectively in difficult terrain, while maintaining sufficient combat power to engage Ligurian warbands when opportunities arose. These modified tactical units typically consisted of 2 to 3 centuries operating with reduced baggage trains and specialised mountain equipment, including improved footwear, lightweight camping gear, and enhanced missile weapons. Intelligence gathering became a crucial component of Roman operations during this period, with Marcellus establishing networks of local informants and employing specialised reconnaissance units to map Ligurian defensive positions and movement patterns. These intelligence operations reveal the complex political structure of Apuani society, with multiple semi-autonomous clans coordinating their military activities through traditional council mechanisms that could rapidly shift defensive priorities in response to changing tactical situations. Roman efforts to exploit potential divisions within Ligurian society through diplomatic initiatives met with limited success, as clan loyalty and shared resistance to foreign domination generally overcame internal political differences. The siege of the Apuani stronghold at Monte Marcello in 223 BC marked a turning point in Roman tactical development and demonstrated the evolution of siege techniques adapted to mountain warfare conditions. Rather than attempting direct assault against the fortress walls, Marcellus implemented a systematic blockade that combined construction of circumvallation works with aggressive patrolling to prevent supply deliveries to the besieged garrison. This approach required substantial engineering efforts to construct fortified lines across difficult terrain, but ultimately proved more effective than previous attempts at direct assault. The blockade operations at Monte Marcello revealed the sophisticated logistical networks that supported Ligurian resistance, with archaeological evidence indicating that besieged garrisons received supplies through underground passages, concealed mountain paths, and coordinated relief operations that demonstrated remarkable organisational capabilities. Roman countermeasures included the construction of observation posts on surrounding peaks, systematic patrolling of potential supply routes, and the deployment of specialised tracking units trained to identify and follow concealed paths through mountain terrain. Winter operations presented particular challenges for both Roman and Ligurian forces, with severe weather conditions in the Apuan Alps creating operational limitations that affected military planning and tactical capabilities. Roman forces, accustomed to winter quarters in more temperate regions, struggled with the harsh mountain climate and the logistical difficulties of maintaining adequate supplies during periods when transportation routes became impassable due to snow and ice. Ligurian forces, better adapted to local weather conditions, exploited these seasonal advantages through winter raids that caught Roman garrisons unprepared for combat operations in extreme conditions. The development of specialised mountain warfare techniques by Roman forces included innovations in equipment, training, and tactical doctrine that would influence imperial military practices throughout subsequent centuries. Roman engineers developed improved cold weather gear, enhanced tent designs for mountain conditions, and specialised tools for construction operations in rocky terrain. Training programs incorporated mountain climbing techniques, cold weather survival skills, and tactical exercises designed to prepare legionary forces for the unique challenges of Alpine warfare. Ligurian resistance strategies evolved continuously throughout the extended conflict, with tribal leaders demonstrating remarkable adaptability in developing new tactical approaches to counter Roman innovations. The establishment of coordinated intelligence networks enabled Apuani forces to anticipate Roman movements and concentrate defensive efforts at crucial points, while the development of improved weapons and equipment enhanced their combat effectiveness against increasingly sophisticated Roman forces. Archaeological evidence from weapon caches hidden throughout the Apuan Alps reveals the extent of Ligurian military preparation, with standardized spear points, improved sling stones, and specialized mountain warfare equipment indicating systematic military organization. The psychological dimensions of the prolonged conflict affected both Roman and Ligurian forces, with the extended duration of mountain operations creating unique stresses that influenced military effectiveness and tactical decision-making. Roman soldiers, accustomed to relatively brief campaigns followed by periods of rest and resupply, found the continuous vigilance required for mountain warfare mentally and physically exhausting. Ligurian defenders, fighting to preserve their ancestral territories and traditional way of life, maintained high morale despite material hardships and the gradual loss of defensive positions to superior Roman resources. The economic impact of the extended conflict strained both Roman imperial finances and Ligurian tribal resources, with the costs of maintaining military operations in difficult terrain far exceeding the expenses of conventional warfare in more accessible regions. Roman expenditures included not only the direct costs of military pay, equipment, and supplies, but also the substantial engineering expenses required for road construction, fortification building, and the establishment of permanent military installations in hostile territory. Ligurian communities faced the disruption of traditional economic activities, the destruction of agricultural resources, and the diversion of manpower from productive activities to military service. The gradual shift in Roman strategy from rapid conquest to systematic pacification reflected growing recognition of the unique challenges presented by Ligurian resistance and the inadequacy of conventional military approaches to mountain warfare. This strategic evolution included the development of long-term occupation policies, the establishment of permanent military colonies, and the implementation of administrative systems designed to integrate conquered territories into the Roman imperial structure, while minimizing the potential for renewed resistance. The campaigns of 186, 180 BC marked the final phase of systematic Roman operations against the Apuani, with consul Quintus Fulvius Flaccus implementing a comprehensive strategy that combined military pressure with diplomatic initiatives designed to divide Ligurian resistance and encourage voluntary submission. These operations demonstrated the culmination of decades of Roman learning about mountain warfare, with improved tactics, better equipment, and enhanced logistical capabilities enabling more effective military operations against increasingly isolated Ligurian strongholds. The decisive breakthrough came with the Roman capture of the Apuani sacred site at Monte Sagro in 181 BC, an operation that required complex coordination between multiple legionary formations and specialized mountain assault units. The loss of this crucial religious and strategic center effectively broke the back of organized Apuani resistance, as the site had served not only as a military stronghold, but as the symbolic heart of tribal identity and political organization. Roman forces exploited this victory through rapid advances that captured remaining Apuani fortifications before defenders could reorganize their defensive lines. The forced relocation of the Apuani population to Samnium in 180 BC represented the culmination of Roman pacification strategy and demonstrated the extent to which prolonged resistance had strained imperial patience with traditional methods of territorial integration. This unprecedented action involved the systematic deportation of approximately 40,000 Apuani men, women and children from their ancestral mountain territories to assigned lands in central Italy. where they could be more easily monitored and controlled by Roman administrative authorities. The logistics of this massive population transfer required careful planning and substantial resources, including the provision of transportation, temporary housing, and agricultural supplies for the displaced communities. The systematic deportation of the Apuani marked not merely the end of military resistance, but the beginning of a comprehensive transformation that would fundamentally alter the character of Ligurian society over the subsequent 2 centuries. The Roman administrative apparatus that emerged in the wake of conquest represented a calculated blend of imperial efficiency and pragmatic accommodation, designed to extract maximum benefit from Ligurian territories while minimizing the risk of renewed rebellion through the gradual integration of surviving populations into the broader Roman world. The establishment of Regio IX Liguria under Augustus in 7 BC represented the culmination of decades of administrative experimentation and territorial reorganization that had begun immediately following the final suppression of Apuani resistance. This new administrative division encompassed not only the traditional Ligurian coastal territories, but also significant portions of the Po Valley and Alpine foothills that had previously been administered as separate military districts. The boundaries of Regio IX extended from the Varo River in the west to the Magra River in the east, incorporating diverse geographical zones that required sophisticated administrative approaches to manage effectively. The Roman administrative structure imposed upon Ligurian territories differed significantly from the municipal systems employed in other Italian regions, reflecting both the challenging geographical conditions and the particular circumstances of conquest that had characterized the region's integration into the empire. Rather than immediately establishing full municipal status for existing settlements, Roman administrators implemented a graduated system of civic privileges that allowed communities to advance toward full Roman citizenship through demonstrated loyalty and administrative competence. The process of extending Roman citizenship to Ligurian communities unfolded gradually over nearly a century, with individual settlements receiving different levels of civic status based on their strategic importance, economic potential, and political reliability. Genua received Latin rights as early as 148 BC, reflecting its crucial position in Mediterranean trade networks and the cooperative attitude of its leading families toward Roman administration. This intermediate status provided Genuese merchants and civic leaders with significant legal privileges, while maintaining Roman oversight of major political and military decisions. The transformation of coastal settlements into recognizably Roman urban centres required massive infrastructure investments that fundamentally altered both the physical appearance and social organisation of Ligurian communities. The construction of forums in Genua, Albin Temilium, and other major centres followed standardised Roman architectural principles, while incorporating local adaptations necessitated by seismic conditions and steep terrain. The Forum at Genua, built during the late 2nd century BC, featured a basilica with reinforced foundations designed to withstand earthquakes, while maintaining the traditional Roman layout of surrounding porticos and administrative buildings. Archaeological excavations of these forum complexes reveal sophisticated engineering solutions to the challenges posed by Ligurian topography. The forum at Albin Temilium incorporated an elaborate system of underground cisterns and drainage channels that prevented flood damage during the severe storms that periodically affected the coastal region. The construction techniques employed in these projects combined Roman architectural expertise with local knowledge of environmental conditions, creating hybrid building styles that would influence regional construction practices for centuries. The development of amphitheatres in major Ligurian centres represented perhaps the most visible symbol of Roman cultural influence, introducing entertainment forms that had no precedent in traditional Ligurian society. The amphitheatre at Albin Temilium, constructed during the reign of Hadrian, could accommodate approximately 8,000 spectators and featured sophisticated crowd control systems, including multiple entrance gates, systematic seating arrangements, and underground facilities for gladiatorial equipment and animal handling. The popularity of gladiatorial games among Romanized Ligurian populations demonstrated the effectiveness of Roman cultural policies in creating new forms of civic identity that transcended traditional tribal loyalties. Public bath complexes constructed throughout Romanized Ligurian settlements served multiple functions beyond personal hygiene, creating social spaces where community members could interact across traditional clan boundaries while participating in distinctly Roman cultural practices. The Thermae at Genua featured elaborate heating systems, decorative mosaic floors depicting maritime themes that reflected local cultural preferences, and social areas where business transactions and political discussions could occur in informal settings. These facilities required substantial ongoing investments in fuel, maintenance and staffing that demonstrated the prosperity achieved by Romanized Ligurian communities. The construction of aqueduct systems to supply these urban amenities required engineering projects of unprecedented scale and complexity in the mountainous Ligurian environment. The aqueduct serving Genua drew water from mountain springs located over 20 kilometers from the city, following a carefully surveyed route that maintained proper gradients across difficult terrain while incorporating numerous bridges, tunnels, and covered channels to protect the water supply from contamination and seasonal flooding. The technical expertise required for these projects necessitated collaboration between Roman engineers and local workers familiar with regional geological conditions. Religious transformation proceeded along parallel lines with administrative and urban development, as Roman authorities implemented policies designed to integrate traditional Ligurian spiritual practices with imperial religious requirements while maintaining social stability during the transition period. The process of religious syncretism that emerged from these policies created hybrid religious traditions that combined traditional Ligurian nature worship with Roman divine concepts, producing distinctive regional variations that reflected local cultural preferences within acceptable imperial frameworks. Votive inscriptions discovered throughout former Ligurian territories reveal the complex process through which traditional deities acquired Roman characteristics while maintaining their essential functions within local religious systems. The mountain god worshipped at the Monte Bego sanctuary became identified with Jupiter Optimus Maximus, while retaining his specific association with alpine passes and seasonal weather patterns. Similarly, coastal deities associated with maritime activities acquired attributes of Neptune while maintaining their particular connections to local fishing grounds and harbour protection. Archaeological investigation of sanctuary sites has revealed the physical manifestations of this religious synthesis, with traditional Ligurian sacred groves being enhanced through the addition of Roman-style temple buildings that house cult statues while preserving the natural features that had originally defined these sacred spaces. The sanctuary complex at Luni incorporated both a formal Roman temple dedicated to Diana and a preserved sacred grove, where traditional Ligurian rituals continued to be performed according to ancestral customs. This architectural arrangement allowed worshippers to participate in both Roman civic religious ceremonies and traditional spiritual practices within the same sacred precinct. The adoption of Roman funeral practices among Ligurian populations demonstrates another aspect of cultural transformation that affected the most intimate aspects of community life. Traditional Ligurian burial customs, which typically involved interment in stone-lined graves with personal weapons and pottery vessels, gradually gave way to Roman cremation practices with elaborate tomb monuments that displayed family status and civic achievements. The necropolis outside Albintamilium contains examples of both traditional and Romanized burial practices from the same time periods, indicating that cultural transformation occurred gradually and unevenly across different social groups. Economic transformation under Roman rule fundamentally altered the basis of Ligurian prosperity through the systematic development of natural resources and the integration of local production into Mediterranean-wide commercial networks. The expansion of marble quarrying operations in the Apuan Alps represented one of the most significant economic developments of the Roman period, with Carrara marble becoming highly prized throughout the empire for its exceptional quality and distinctive appearance. Roman engineering techniques enabled the extraction of much larger blocks than had been possible using traditional methods, while improved transportation infrastructure allowed these materials to reach distant markets efficiently. The development of systematic quarrying operations required substantial initial investments in equipment, transportation infrastructure, and skilled labour that transformed the economic landscape of former Apuani territories. Roman engineers constructed specialised roads with gradual gradients that allowed ox-drawn carts to transport massive stone blocks from mountain quarries to coastal loading facilities. The harbour at Luna was extensively modified to accommodate the specialised vessels required for marble transportation, with reinforced docking facilities and crane systems capable of handling blocks weighing several tons. The expansion of olive cultivation throughout suitable coastal areas represented another major economic transformation that introduced Mediterranean agricultural techniques while taking advantage of favourable local climate conditions. Roman agricultural experts identified numerous coastal valleys where olive trees could be successfully cultivated using terracing techniques that maximise productive land while preventing soil erosion on steep slopes. The olive oil produced in these installations achieved recognition throughout the Western Empire for its quality, creating export markets that brought substantial wealth to Romanised Ligurian communities. Wine production also expanded significantly under Roman administration. With the introduction of new grape varieties and improved cultivation techniques that enhanced both quantity and quality of local wine production. The hillsides around Genua became extensively planted with vineyards that employed sophisticated terracing systems and irrigation networks to optimise growing conditions. The distinctive wines produced in these installations developed reputations in Rome itself, with several Ligurian vintages achieving premium prices in metropolitan markets. Maritime trade expanded dramatically under Roman rule through the systematic improvement of harbour facilities and the integration of Ligurian ports into imperial commercial networks. The harbour at Genua underwent extensive reconstruction during the early imperial period, with the construction of massive breakwaters that created protected anchorages capable of accommodating the largest merchant vessels operating in Mediterranean trade. These improvements enabled Genua to serve as a major transshipment point for goods moving between Gaul, Iberia, and the eastern Mediterranean, generating substantial customs revenues for imperial authorities while creating unprecedented prosperity for local merchant families. The development of specialised shipbuilding industries in Ligurian ports reflected both the region's traditional maritime expertise and the opportunities created by expanded Roman naval requirements. Shipyards at Genua and other coastal centres began producing vessels designed specifically for different aspects of Mediterranean commerce, including specialised grain ships, wine transports, and passenger vessels that incorporated both Roman technical innovations and traditional Ligurian design features adapted to local sailing conditions. Banking and financial services emerged as another important economic sector as Romanised Ligurian communities developed the commercial infrastructure necessary to support expanded trade activities. Wealthy Ligurian families established banking operations that provided credit for commercial ventures, currency exchange services for international trade, and investment opportunities for the surplus capital generated by successful agricultural and commercial enterprises. These financial institutions facilitated the integration of Ligurian merchants into Mediterranean-wide commercial networks while providing the capital necessary for continued economic expansion. The transformation of traditional Ligurian craft production under Roman influence created new opportunities for artisans while maintaining connections to ancestral technical traditions. Pottery workshops in Romanised settlements began producing vessels that combined Roman forms and decorative techniques with traditional Ligurian functional requirements, creating distinctive regional styles that achieved wide distribution throughout the Western Empire. These hybrid ceramic traditions demonstrated the successful integration of Roman technical innovations with local aesthetic preferences and practical needs. Metalworking industries also evolved significantly during the Roman period, with traditional Ligurian expertise in bronze and iron working being enhanced through the introduction of new techniques and the availability of improved raw materials through imperial trade networks. Workshops in Genoa and other centres began producing both utilitarian items for local use and luxury goods for export markets, with Ligurian metalworkers achieving particular recognition for their skill in producing decorative bronze vessels and high-quality weapons that incorporated both Roman technical standards and distinctive regional design elements. The development of textile production represented another area where traditional Ligurian skills were enhanced and expanded under Roman administration. The establishment of systematic sheep and goat herding operations in mountain areas provided reliable sources of high-quality wool and other fibres, while the introduction of improved spinning and weaving techniques enabled the production of textiles that met Roman quality standards for both local consumption and export markets. The distinctive woolen cloaks produced by Ligurian workshops became popular throughout the northern provinces, where their warmth and durability made them particularly valued by military personnel and civilians living in harsh climates. Educational transformation accompanied economic and cultural changes as Romanized Ligurian communities established schools and educational institutions that prepared young people for participation in imperial, administrative, and commercial systems. These schools typically offered instruction in Latin language and literature, Roman law and administrative procedures, and mathematical skills necessary for commercial activities, while also maintaining instruction in traditional Ligurian cultural knowledge that remained relevant for local community life. The emergence of Ligurian families in imperial administrative and military service demonstrated the success of Romanization policies in creating loyal and capable provincial elites. Several Ligurian families achieved senatorial rank during the early imperial period, with their members serving in important administrative positions throughout the empire, while maintaining strong connections to their regional origins. These successful careers provided models for other ambitious Ligurians while creating networks of influence that benefited their home communities through improved access to imperial resources and opportunities. The transformation of Ligurian settlements from modest tribal centres into thriving Roman municipalities reached its zenith during the first 2 centuries of the imperial period, when unprecedented economic prosperity and systematic urban planning combined to create some of the most impressive provincial cities in the Western Empire. The Golden Age that emerged under Augustus and continued through the Antonine dynasty witnessed the complete metamorphosis of the Ligurian coast into a sophisticated urban corridor that rivaled the established cities of southern Italy in both architectural splendour and commercial importance. Genua's emergence as the preeminent city of the region reflected both its strategic advantages and the systematic investments made by imperial administrators who recognised its potential as a major administrative and commercial hub. The city's position at the convergence of multiple mountain valleys with the Mediterranean coast created natural advantages that Roman engineers enhanced through ambitious construction projects that transformed the modest Ligurian settlement into a major imperial port. The harbour underwent complete reconstruction during the reign of Augustus, with massive concrete breakwaters extending nearly 400 metres into the Mediterranean to create protected anchorages capable of accommodating the largest grain ships operating between Egypt and Rome. The engineering challenges posed by Genua's mountainous setting required innovative solutions that pushed Roman construction techniques to their limits. The city's expansion up the steep hillside surrounding the harbour necessitated the construction of elaborate terracing systems that created level building sites while preventing landslides during the heavy rains that characterised the region's winter climate. These terraces, supported by massive retaining walls built using the opus caementicium technique perfected in Rome, created distinct urban districts that rose in carefully planned tiers from the waterfront commercial areas to the residential quarters that crowned the surrounding hills. The Forum complex, constructed at the heart of Genua during the Augustan period, demonstrated the successful adaptation of Roman urban planning principles to challenging topographical conditions. Built on an artificially levelled platform carved from the hillside, the Forum measured approximately 120 metres by 80 metres and featured a basilica with triple naves supported by columns of imported Greek marble. The building's design incorporated seismic resistance features, learned from centuries of Ligurian experience with earthquake damage, including flexible joint systems and reinforced foundations that allowed the structure to absorb ground movement without catastrophic failure. The commercial facilities surrounding Genua's Forum reflected the city's growing importance as a transshipment point for goods moving throughout the Western Mediterranean. Warehouses built along the waterfront incorporated sophisticated storage systems designed to protect valuable cargoes from moisture damage and theft, with multiple levels of vaulted chambers that could accommodate different types of merchandise while maintaining optimal storage conditions. The largest of these facilities, constructed during the reign of Trajan, contained over 50 individual storage units, with a total capacity exceeding 10,000 amphorae, making it one of the largest commercial storage complexes outside Rome itself. The development of Genua's residential districts revealed the prosperity achieved by the city's merchant and administrative classes during the early imperial period. Excavations in the hillside neighbourhoods have uncovered elaborate domes featuring sophisticated heating systems, decorative mosaic floors, and private bath complexes that rivaled those found in the most exclusive districts of Rome. The House of the Dolphins, discovered during 20th century archaeological work, contained over 30 rooms, arranged around multiple peristyle courtyards, with wall paintings depicting maritime scenes that celebrated the source of the family's commercial success. The water supply systems constructed to serve Genua's expanding population required engineering projects that demonstrated Roman technical capabilities at their most impressive. The main aqueduct, completed during the reign of Hadrian, drew water from mountain springs located over 30 kilometres from the city, following a precisely surveyed route that maintained proper gradients while crossing numerous valleys and ridges through a combination of bridges, tunnels, and elevated channels. The system's daily capacity exceeded 8 million litres, providing abundant water not only for basic consumption, but also for the elaborate fountain displays and public baths that became symbols of the city's prosperity. Albin Tamilium experienced parallel development as the western gateway to Ligurian territory, with Roman administrators investing heavily in urban improvements that transformed the modest Intermilii settlement into an impressive provincial city. The city's theatre, constructed during the reign of Augustus and expanded under Hadrian, could accommodate over 4,000 spectators and featured elaborate stage machinery that enabled the presentation of complex dramatic performances. The building's acoustic design incorporated lessons learned from Greek theatre construction, while adapting to the specific requirements of Roman dramatic traditions, creating a venue that became renowned throughout the western provinces for the quality of its productions. The residential development of Albin Tamilium reflected the wealth generated by the city's position as a major commercial centre, serving both maritime and overland trade routes. The Villa of the Mosaics, excavated during the 1930s, contained elaborate floor decorations depicting scenes from Greek mythology executed by craftsmen who combined traditional Mediterranean artistic techniques with local materials, including coloured stones from nearby mountain quarries. The villa's bath complex featured sophisticated heating systems and decorative elements that demonstrated the owner's familiarity with the latest Roman architectural fashions, while incorporating regional preferences for natural lighting and ventilation. The development of luxury villa culture along the Ligurian coast represented one of the most distinctive aspects of the region's imperial prosperity, as wealthy Romans discovered the exceptional climate and scenic beauty that made the area an ideal retreat from the pressures of metropolitan life. These coastal residences, built by senators, equestrian families and successful merchants, established architectural and landscape design traditions that would influence elite residential development throughout the empire, while creating a distinctive regional variant of Roman villa culture. The Villa of Varigoti, constructed during the late 1st century AD, exemplified the integration of Roman residential architecture with the specific environmental conditions of the Ligurian coast. Built on terraces carved from coastal cliffs, the complex featured residential quarters arranged to maximize views of the Mediterranean, while incorporating sophisticated engineering systems that protected the buildings from storm damage and provided reliable water supplies during dry periods. The villa's gardens combined formal Roman landscape design with Mediterranean vegetation adapted to local soil and climate conditions, creating outdoor spaces that complemented the architectural elements while taking advantage of the region's exceptional natural beauty. Imperial family members and their close associates established some of the most impressive coastal residences, with archaeological evidence suggesting that several villas served as regular retreats for members of the Julio-Claudian and Flavian dynasties. The Villa Matutia, located near modern San Remo, contained residential facilities sufficient to accommodate large imperial entourages, along with the administrative staff necessary to conduct government business during extended stays. The complex included private harbour facilities, elaborate bathhouses, and reception halls decorated with imported marbles and sophisticated fresco cycles that celebrated both imperial achievements and local maritime traditions. The popularity of Ligurian coastal villas among Roman elites created a distinctive seasonal society that combined traditional Roman social customs with regional recreational activities adapted to the maritime environment. Literary sources describe elaborate dinner parties held in seaside pavilions, where guests could enjoy both sophisticated cuisine and spectacular sunset views, while inscriptional evidence reveals the existence of social clubs organised around sailing, fishing and other maritime pursuits that took advantage of the region's exceptional coastal conditions. The construction and maintenance of these luxury residences generated substantial economic activity that benefited local communities throughout the coastal region. Skilled craftsmen specialising in villa construction and decoration established workshops in major centres, while the seasonal presence of wealthy Romans created markets for luxury goods, specialised services, and agricultural products that enhanced the prosperity of surrounding rural areas. The demand for high-quality building materials stimulated expanded quarrying operations, while the need for exotic plants and specialised agricultural products encouraged the development of horticultural industries that supplied villa gardens throughout the region. The infrastructure projects undertaken during the imperial period fundamentally transformed the accessibility and commercial potential of Ligurian territory through the construction of road networks that connected the region to the broader imperial transportation system. The Via Aurelia, completed during the late Republican period and extensively improved under imperial administration, provided the primary coastal route connecting Rome to Gaul and served as the backbone for regional economic development. The road's construction through the challenging Ligurian terrain required sophisticated engineering techniques, including numerous bridges, tunnels, and retaining walls that enabled reliable year-round transportation, despite difficult topographical and climatic conditions. The Via Julia Augusta, constructed during the reign of Augustus to improve connections between Italy and the Iberian provinces, represented an even more ambitious engineering achievement that demonstrated Roman capabilities at their most impressive. This route, which followed the coastal mountains from Genua to the Rhone Valley, required the construction of bridges spanning deep gorges, tunnels carved through solid rock, and elaborate switchback systems that maintained manageable gradients across extremely steep terrain. The road's total length exceeded 200 kilometres, with construction costs that represented one of the largest infrastructure investments undertaken in any provincial region during the early imperial period. The harbour improvements undertaken at ports throughout the Ligurian coast reflected the growing importance of maritime trade in the region's economy and the systematic efforts of imperial administrators to enhance commercial facilities. Luna's harbour received particular attention due to its role in marble transportation, with the construction of specialised loading facilities that could handle the massive stone blocks quarried in the nearby Apuan Alps. These installations included reinforced docking areas, sophisticated crane systems, and covered storage facilities that protected valuable marble shipments from weather damage, while awaiting transportation to construction projects throughout the empire. The port facilities at Genua underwent continuous expansion and improvement throughout the first 2 centuries of imperial rule, with successive emperors authorising major construction projects that enhanced the harbour's capacity and operational efficiency. The construction of additional breakwaters during the reign of Trajan created protected anchorages for over 200 vessels simultaneously, while the development of specialised docking facilities enabled the efficient handling of different types of cargo, including grain, wine, olive oil and manufactured goods moving between various parts of the empire. The lighthouse constructed at the entrance to Genua's harbour during the reign of Hadrian represented both a practical navigation aid and a symbol of the city's importance within imperial commercial networks. Standing over 40 metres tall and visible from distances exceeding 20 kilometres, the structure incorporated the latest Roman engineering techniques, including a sophisticated oil-burning beacon system and reflective mirrors that enhanced the light's visibility during adverse weather conditions. The lighthouse's architectural design combined functional requirements with decorative elements that celebrated both imperial achievements and local maritime traditions, creating a monument that served as a distinctive landmark for approaching vessels. The cultural achievements of Romanised Ligurian society during the imperial period reflected the successful integration of local populations into broader Mediterranean intellectual and artistic traditions, while maintaining distinctive regional characteristics that enriched the empire's cultural diversity. Ligurian families that had achieved wealth and status through commercial success or imperial service became patrons of literature, architecture, and artistic production that contributed to the cultural vitality of their home communities while participating in empire-wide intellectual movements. Marcus Aemilius Scaurus, descended from a prominent Genoese merchant family, achieved recognition as one of the leading historians of the early imperial period through his comprehensive account of the Gallic Wars that provided detailed descriptions of military operations in the Alpine regions, where his family's commercial interests had given him exceptional knowledge of local conditions. His work, praised by contemporary critics for its accuracy and literary merit, demonstrated the intellectual capabilities of provincial elites, while contributing valuable historical documentation that enhanced understanding of Roman expansion in difficult terrain. Gaius Oppius Sabinus, born in Albintimilium to a family that had prospered through maritime trade, pursued a successful career in imperial administration that culminated in his appointment as governor of Lusitania during the reign of Trajan. His administrative innovations in provincial taxation and urban development were later adopted in other frontier regions, while his patronage of architectural projects in his hometown contributed to Albintimilium's transformation into one of the most impressive cities in the western provinces. His correspondence with leading intellectual figures of his time reveals the sophisticated cultural networks that connected provincial elites with metropolitan centres of learning. The military service of Ligurians in imperial armies provided another avenue through which regional populations achieved prominence while contributing to imperial expansion and defence. The exceptional skills of Ligurian sailors made them particularly valuable for naval operations, with several Ligurian officers achieving high rank in the imperial fleet and contributing to major military victories throughout the Mediterranean. Lucius Baebius Tamphilus, Born in Luna to a family involved in marble quarrying, rose to command naval squadrons during Trajan's Dacian campaigns, and later served as admiral of the classis Missinensis, the empire's primary naval force based in the Bay of Naples. Ligurian expertise in mountain warfare also proved valuable for imperial military operations in difficult terrain, with veterans of the original conquest campaigns serving as instructors and tactical advisors for legions operating in the Alpine regions and other mountainous frontiers. These military specialists contributed to the development of Roman mountain warfare techniques, while maintaining connections to their home communities that facilitated the integration of traditional Ligurian military knowledge into imperial tactical doctrine. The artistic production of Romanized Ligurian communities reflected both imperial cultural influences and distinctive regional traditions that created hybrid styles appreciated throughout the western provinces. Workshops in major centres produced decorative sculptures, architectural elements, and luxury goods that combined Roman technical standards with local aesthetic preferences and materials. The sculptural workshop established in Luna during the reign of Hadrian achieved particular recognition for its marble portraits and decorative reliefs that incorporated the exceptional qualities of local stone with sophisticated carving techniques learned from metropolitan masters. The pottery production of Ligurian workshops evolved during the imperial period to serve both local markets and export trade, with distinctive regional styles that combined Roman forms with traditional decorative motifs and functional adaptations to local cooking and storage requirements. The terra sigillata produced in Genoese workshops achieved wide distribution throughout Gaul and the Rhine frontier, where its quality and distinctive appearance made it highly valued by both military personnel and civilian populations. These ceramic industries provided employment for substantial numbers of skilled craftsmen, while generating export revenues that contributed to regional prosperity. The development of glass production in Ligurian centres reflected both the availability of suitable raw materials and the technical expertise acquired through contact with Eastern Mediterranean craftsmen who had established workshops in major commercial centres. The glass vessels produced in these facilities combined Roman forms with distinctive decorative techniques that incorporated local artistic traditions, creating products that achieved recognition for their beauty and technical excellence throughout the Western Empire. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ligurian glass workshops supplied markets extending from Britain to North Africa, demonstrating the commercial success of these specialised industries. The prosperity that had defined Ligurian urban centres for over 2 centuries began to unravel during the tumultuous decades of the 3rd century crisis, when the Roman Empire's political fragmentation and economic collapse reverberated through provincial territories with devastating consequences for communities that had grown dependent on imperial trade networks and administrative stability. The systematic breakdown of monetary systems, supply chains, and defensive arrangements that had sustained Ligurian cities since the Augustan period forced local populations to confront challenges that would fundamentally alter the character of regional society and mark the beginning of a prolonged period of decline and transformation. The debasement of imperial coinage that accelerated during the reigns of Gallienus and his successors struck Ligurian commercial centres with particular severity due to their extensive involvement in Mediterranean trade networks that relied on stable currency values for complex international transactions. Archaeological evidence from Genoa reveals the dramatic impact of monetary instability on local commerce, with coin hoards dating to the 260 SAD containing debased silver pieces that retained less than 5% precious metal content compared to the high-quality issues of the early imperial period. Merchants who had built fortunes through carefully calculated investments and long-distance trade found themselves unable to maintain commercial relationships when currency fluctuations made it impossible to determine fair exchange rates for goods moving between different regions of the empire. The disruption of traditional supply chains that had connected Ligurian producers to markets throughout the western provinces created cascading economic problems that affected every aspect of regional society. The marble quarries of Carrara, which had operated continuously since the Augustan period and employed thousands of workers in extraction, transportation and finishing operations, experienced dramatic production declines when major construction projects throughout the empire were cancelled due to imperial financial constraints. Archaeological surveys of abandoned quarry sites reveal evidence of hasty evacuation, with valuable equipment left in place and partially completed extraction operations abandoned when workers fled to seek employment elsewhere. The olive oil and wine industries that had generated substantial export revenues for coastal communities faced similar disruptions when Germanic raids along the Rhine frontier made overland transportation routes unreliable and dangerous. The elaborate villa estates that had produced premium agricultural products for metropolitan markets were gradually abandoned as their owners either fled to safer locations or found themselves unable to maintain the sophisticated infrastructure required for high-quality production. Excavations at the Villa Matutia near San Remo reveal evidence of systematic dismantling during the late 3rd century, with valuable architectural elements including marble columns and decorative sculptures being carefully removed for transportation elsewhere. Urban populations that had grown accustomed to reliable food supplies from throughout the Mediterranean found themselves facing periodic shortages when supply ships failed to arrive due to increased piracy and naval warfare that made maritime commerce increasingly hazardous. The granaries that had been constructed in major ports during the imperial period were gradually converted to other uses as regular grain shipments from Egypt and North Africa became unreliable. Archaeological evidence from Genoa indicates that substantial portions of the harbour district were abandoned during the 270 SAD, with warehouses being systematically stripped of valuable materials including lead pipes, bronze fittings, and marble decorations that could be sold or reused elsewhere. The breakdown of imperial administrative systems created additional challenges for Ligurian communities that had relied on Roman bureaucratic structures for tax collection, legal dispute resolution, and coordination of public works projects. Local magistrates found themselves without clear authority or adequate resources to maintain essential urban services, while the withdrawal of imperial garrisons left communities vulnerable to banditry and external attacks. Inscriptional evidence from this period reveals the emergence of local strongmen who assumed quasi-governmental authority in individual cities, often through control of remaining military resources or private armed forces recruited from displaced populations. The construction of defensive fortifications around previously open cities marked one of the most visible responses to the deteriorating security situation that characterized the 3rd century crisis. Genua's circuit wall, hastily constructed during the 260 SAD using materials salvaged from abandoned public buildings, enclosed a much smaller area than the city had occupied during its imperial heyday, indicating significant population decline and urban contraction. The wall's construction techniques reveal the desperate circumstances under which it was built, with irregular stone blocks, recycled architectural elements, and crude mortarwork that contrasted sharply with the sophisticated masonry of earlier periods. The fortification of Albintimilium followed similar patterns, with archaeological evidence indicating that substantial portions of the city's residential districts were abandoned to concentrate the remaining population within a defensible perimeter centred on the forum and harbour areas. The hastily constructed walls incorporated elements from dismantled public buildings, including decorative sculptures, inscribed stones, and architectural fragments that had originally adorned temples and civic structures. The reuse of these materials in defensive contexts symbolised the transformation of civic priorities from cultural display to basic survival that characterised this period of crisis. Archaeological investigation of rural settlement patterns reveals widespread abandonment of isolated farmsteads and small villages as populations concentrated in fortified locations that could provide better protection against raiders and bandits. The the systematic survey of the Magra Valley has identified dozens of sites that were abandoned during the 3rd century, with evidence of hasty evacuation, including buried coin hoards, concealed valuables, and unfinished agricultural work that suggests residents fled suddenly when threatened by approaching dangers. Many of these abandoned settlements were never reoccupied, indicating permanent changes in regional population distribution that reflected the new security realities of the post-imperial period. The Alemannic incursions of the 260 SAD brought Germanic raiders deep into Ligurian territory for the first time since the original Roman conquest, demonstrating the complete breakdown of frontier defences that had protected the region for over 3 centuries. These raids, which penetrated as far south as the coastal cities and reached the marble quarries of the Apuan Alps, revealed the vulnerability of communities that had grown complacent during generations of imperial protection. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout the region indicates systematic destruction during this period, with burned building levels, scattered human remains, and abandoned valuables that attest to the violence and disruption caused by these incursions. The raiders' tactics reflected their familiarity with Roman defensive systems and their ability to exploit the weaknesses created by reduced garrison strength and deteriorating infrastructure. Rather than attempting to capture and hold fortified positions, Alemannic forces conducted rapid strikes designed to gather portable wealth and captives before imperial forces could respond effectively. The speed and coordination of these operations suggests sophisticated intelligence gathering and advanced planning that enabled raiders to identify the most valuable targets while avoiding areas where effective resistance might be encountered. Local responses to these barbarian incursions varied considerably depending on available resources and leadership capabilities, with some communities organising effective defensive measures, while others suffered catastrophic losses due to inadequate preparation or coordination. The hilltop settlement of Montemarcello, which had been abandoned since the Roman conquest of the Apuani, was hastily reoccupied during this period as local populations sought refuge in its naturally defensible position. Archaeological evidence indicates that the ancient fortifications were rapidly repaired using available materials, while new defensive works were constructed to address tactical developments that had occurred since the original Bronze Age occupation. The establishment of local militias composed of farmers, craftsmen and other civilians marked a significant departure from the professional military arrangements that had characterized the imperial period. These irregular forces, equipped with whatever weapons could be obtained locally and trained according to traditional Ligurian mountain warfare techniques that had been preserved in oral tradition, proved surprisingly effective against raiders who expected to encounter only demoralized civilian populations. Inscriptional evidence from several communities commemorates successful defensive actions led by local leaders who organized resistance efforts using knowledge passed down from ancestors who had fought against the original Roman conquest. The development of signal systems using mountaintop fires and other communication methods enabled isolated communities to coordinate their defensive efforts and provide advance warning of approaching raiders. Archaeological investigation of elevated sites throughout the region has identified numerous signal stations dating to this period, with evidence of prepared fuel supplies, communication equipment, and permanent guard posts that maintained constant surveillance of potential approach routes. These installations required substantial community investment and organisation, indicating that local populations were capable of sophisticated defensive planning despite the absence of imperial military support. The administrative reorganisation implemented by Diocletian beginning in 284 AD represented a systematic attempt to address the systemic problems that had contributed to the 3rd century crisis, but the reform's implementation in Ligurian territories revealed the extent to which regional conditions had deteriorated during the preceding decades of instability. The creation of the Diocese of Italy as an intermediate administrative level between provincial and imperial government was designed to improve coordination and oversight. but Ligurian communities found themselves subject to increased taxation and bureaucratic control at a time when their economic capacity had been severely damaged by years of disruption. The redrawing of provincial boundaries under Diocletian's reforms reflected both administrative efficiency considerations and the realities of demographic and economic changes that had occurred during the crisis period. The traditional territory of Regius IX Liguria was divided between multiple new provinces, with coastal areas being incorporated into Alpes Maritimae, while interior regions were assigned to different administrative units based on their accessibility and economic potential. These boundary changes disrupted traditional commercial relationships and political connections that had developed over centuries, forcing communities to establish new administrative and economic arrangements under unfamiliar bureaucratic structures. The implementation of Diocletian's price controls and currency reforms created additional challenges for Ligurian merchants and producers who were struggling to rebuild their economic activities after decades of disruption. The maximum price edicts that were intended to control inflation often bore little relationship to actual production costs and market conditions in peripheral regions, making it difficult for local producers to operate profitably within legal constraints. Archaeological evidence suggests that substantial black market activities developed during this period, with hidden workshops and concealed storage facilities indicating systematic efforts to evade imperial price controls and taxation requirements. Constantine's administrative innovations, including the establishment of new capital cities and the reorganization of military commands, further altered the position of Ligurian territories within imperial strategic planning. The region's traditional importance as a gateway between Italy and Gaul diminished as new transportation routes and administrative centres redirected commercial and military traffic through different corridors. The construction of Constantinople and the development of Danubian frontier defences shifted imperial attention and resources toward the eastern provinces, leaving western regions like Liguria with reduced access to imperial investment and support. The Christianization policies promoted by Constantine and his successors created additional social tensions in the Ligurian communities where traditional religious practices had remained strong despite centuries of Roman rule. Archaeological evidence indicates that many traditional sanctuary sites were abandoned or destroyed during the early 4th century, with Christian churches being constructed using materials salvaged from pagan temples and shrines. The transition was often violent and disruptive, with inscriptional evidence recording conflicts between Christian and pagan factions that further weakened community cohesion during an already difficult period. Archaeological investigation of urban sites throughout the region reveals clear evidence of systematic contraction during the late 3rd and early 4th centuries, with substantial portions of previously occupied areas being abandoned and converted to agricultural use or left vacant. The Forum area of Genua, which had been the bustling centre of commercial and civic life during the imperial period, shows evidence of gradual abandonment, with buildings being systematically dismantled for their materials while remaining structures were converted to workshops and residential use that bore little resemblance to their original functions. The transformation of public bath complexes into private residences or industrial facilities illustrates the changing priorities and reduced resources that characterized this period of urban decline. The elaborate thermae that had served as social centres and symbols of Roman civilization were gradually stripped of their decorative elements and mechanical systems, with the resulting spaces being subdivided into smaller units that could serve more basic residential or commercial functions. The maintenance requirements and fuel costs associated with traditional Roman bathing facilities had become prohibitive for communities struggling with reduced populations and economic resources. Rural fortification during this period took forms that differed significantly from both traditional Ligurian defensive systems and Roman military architecture, reflecting the particular challenges faced by small communities that needed to protect themselves against raids while maintaining access to agricultural resources. The fortified settlements that emerged during the 4th century typically incorporated existing topographical features with hastily constructed walls and defensive works that could be built and maintained using local materials and labour. These installations often included protected areas for livestock and grain storage, indicating that defenders expected to endure extended sieges without external support. The development of these rural strongholds marked a return to settlement patterns that resembled those of the pre-Roman period, with populations concentrating in defensible hilltop locations while maintaining control over surrounding agricultural territories through a network of watchtowers and patrol routes. Archaeological survey work has identified numerous sites that were first occupied during the 4th century AD, indicating significant population movements as communities abandoned exposed locations in favour of more secure defensive positions. The construction techniques employed at these sites often incorporated traditional Ligurian building methods that had been preserved in rural areas despite centuries of Roman influence. The persistence of traditional Ligurian cultural elements during this period of crisis and transformation suggests that Romanization had been less complete than imperial administrators had believed, with local populations maintaining alternative social structures and technical knowledge that proved valuable when imperial system failed. The revival of traditional mountain warfare techniques, defensive construction methods, and subsistence strategies enabled Ligurian communities to survive challenges that proved catastrophic for more thoroughly Romanized populations in other regions. This cultural resilience would prove crucial for the survival of regional identity through the even greater challenges that would emerge during the subsequent period of barbarian invasions and imperial collapse. The gradual penetration of Christian teachings into Ligurian communities during the 4th century AD occurred through established commercial networks that had survived the disruptions of the previous century, with Syrian and Greek merchants carrying religious ideas alongside their material goods to ports where cosmopolitan population proved receptive to new spiritual concepts. The earliest documented Christian presence in Genoa dates to approximately 312 AD, when inscriptional evidence records the existence of a small community meeting in private homes near the harbour district, where foreign traders and local converts gathered for worship services conducted in Greek rather than Latin, reflecting the international character of early Christian congregations in commercial centres. The martyrdom of Romulus during the Diocletianic persecution around 303 AD provided Ligurian Christianity with its first recognised saint and established a focal point for developing religious identity that would prove crucial for subsequent missionary activities. Archaeological investigation beneath the later Cathedral of Genoa has revealed evidence of a modest shrine constructed during the early 4th century, where Romulus's remains were venerated by a growing community of believers who risked imperial persecution to maintain their religious practices. The shrine's simple construction, consisting of a small stone chamber with basic altar arrangements, contrasted sharply with the elaborate pagan temples that still dominated the urban landscape. Yet its very existence demonstrated the determination of early Christians to establish permanent religious institutions despite official hostility. The conversion of Constantine fundamentally altered the position of Christian communities throughout Ligurian territories, transforming an underground religious movement into a favoured imperial cult that could openly compete with traditional pagan practices for popular allegiance. The Edict of Milan in 313 AD enabled Christian congregations to emerge from clandestine meetings in private homes and begin constructing purpose-built churches that could accommodate growing numbers of converts while serving as visible symbols of the new religion's imperial approval. The first church constructed in Genoa following the legalization of Christianity occupied a prominent site near the Forum, where its presence announced the dramatic shift in religious policy while challenging the continued dominance of traditional pagan institutions. The architectural development of early Christian churches in Ligurian cities revealed the complex process of adapting Mediterranean Christian building traditions to local conditions while incorporating elements that would appeal to populations accustomed to traditional religious practices. The basilica, constructed in Albintamilium during the reign of Constantine, featured a modified Roman basilical plan with an enlarged atrium that could accommodate the large crowds that gathered for major religious festivals, while the interior incorporated decorative elements, including marble columns salvaged from abandoned pagan temples and mosaic floors depicting Christian symbols alongside traditional Mediterranean motifs that maintained connections to familiar artistic traditions. The establishment of episcopal sees in major Ligurian centres represented a crucial step in the institutional development of regional Christianity, providing administrative structures that could coordinate missionary activities, oversee the construction of religious buildings, and maintain doctrinal consistency across dispersed communities. The first documented bishop of Genoa, Valentinus, appears in historical records around 381 AD, when he participated in the Council of Aquileia and demonstrated the integration of Ligurian Christian communities into broader ecclesiastical networks that connected provincial churches with imperial religious policy. Valentinus's correspondence with other bishops reveals the challenges faced by Christian leaders attempting to establish effective religious administration in regions where pagan practices remained strong and imperial support was inconsistent. The construction of baptisteries adjacent to major churches reflected the growing emphasis on formal conversion ceremonies that mark the transition from traditional religious practices to Christian faith. The octagonal baptistry constructed beside the Cathedral of Genoa during the late 4th century incorporated sophisticated hydraulic systems that provided both the flowing water required for immersion baptisms and the drainage necessary to maintain sanitary conditions during large-scale conversion ceremonies. The building's decorative program included frescoes depicting scenes from the life of Christ, alongside symbolic representations of baptism that were designed to educate new converts about fundamental Christian doctrines, while providing visual reinforcement for the spiritual transformation represented by the baptismal ceremony. Archaeological evidence from rural areas indicates that the Christianization of Ligurian territories proceeded unevenly, with coastal communities generally adopting the new religion more rapidly than interior settlements where traditional practices maintained stronger holds on popular allegiance. Excavations at rural sites throughout the Magra Valley have revealed the persistence of traditional religious practices well into the 5th century, with votive deposits and ritual installations indicating that many rural populations continue to venerate traditional deities despite official Christian policies. The gradual transformation of these practices involved complex processes of religious syncretism that incorporated Christian symbols and concepts into traditional ritual frameworks, rather than completely replacing established religious systems. The development of Christian pilgrimage sites and former pagan sanctuaries demonstrated the strategic adaptation of missionary activities to existing religious landscapes, while providing continuity that eased the transition for populations attached to traditional sacred places. The sanctuary complex at Montebello underwent gradual Christianization during the 4th and 5th centuries, with Christian symbols being carved alongside existing Bronze Age petroglyphs, while new chapels were constructed at locations that had previously housed pagan shrines. This process of religious transformation maintained the sacred character of the site while redirecting devotional activities toward Christian purposes, creating hybrid religious landscapes that satisfied both official ecclesiastical requirements and popular attachment to ancestral sacred places. The role of Ligurian ports in facilitating communication between different parts of the fragmenting Western Empire became increasingly crucial as overland transportation routes became unreliable due to barbarian raids and political instability. Genoa's harbour served as a vital link connecting Rome with Gallic territories, enabling the transmission of imperial edicts, religious communications, and commercial information that helped maintain administrative coordination despite the growing challenges facing central authority. The port's facilities were systematically improved during the 4th century to to accommodate the specialised vessels required for official communications, including fast courier ships that could maintain regular schedules despite deteriorating security conditions along alternative routes. The establishment of imperial post stations in major Ligurian cities reflected the region's continued strategic importance for imperial communications and administration, despite the general decline in urban prosperity that characterised the late imperial period. These facilities, staffed by imperial officials and equipped with fresh horses and supplies for official travellers, maintained connections between distant parts of the empire while providing local communities with access to information about political developments and policy changes that affected their daily lives. Archaeological investigation of the post station at Albin Tamilium has revealed sophisticated facilities including stables for over 50 horses, residential quarters for official personnel, and secure storage areas for official documents and valuable communications. The development of specialised courier services that operated between Ligurian ports and other imperial centres created new economic opportunities for local populations, while maintaining the commercial networks that had sustained regional prosperity during earlier periods. These services employed local sailors familiar with coastal navigation conditions and mountain guides knowledgeable about overland routes that could provide alternatives when primary transportation corridors became impassable due to military operations or natural disasters. The reliability and efficiency of these communication systems made Ligurian ports increasingly valuable to imperial administrators struggling to maintain control over distant territories with limited military resources. The Gothic invasions that began affecting northern Italy during the early 5th century brought new military pressures to Ligurian territories, while demonstrating the strategic importance of coastal strongholds that could serve as bases for both defensive operations and potential evacuation routes. The first Gothic raids reached Ligurian territory around 408 AD, when Alaric's forces penetrated the Alpine passes and threatened communities that had enjoyed relative security since the Alemannic incursions of the previous century. The response to these threats revealed both the continued military capabilities of local populations and the limitations of imperial defensive resources that were increasingly stretched across multiple frontier zones. The fortification of coastal cities during this period incorporated lessons learned from earlier barbarian raids, while adapting to the specific tactical challenges posed by Gothic military capabilities. The defensive walls constructed around Genua during the early 5th century featured improved designs that could withstand siege engines, while providing platforms for the deployment of artillery equipment, including ballistae and catapults that had been manufactured in local workshops using traditional Ligurian metalworking expertise. The wall's construction required the systematic demolition of suburban areas and the concentration of defensive resources within a reduced perimeter that could be effectively defended by available military forces. The siege of Genua by Ostrogothic forces in 538 AD during Justinian's reconquest campaigns demonstrated both the effectiveness of these defensive improvements and the strategic value that competing powers placed on controlling major Ligurian ports. The siege lasted over 8 months, with Gothic forces attempting to starve the city into submission, while Byzantine naval forces struggled to maintain supply lines through increasingly dangerous coastal waters. Archaeological evidence from this period includes extensive deposits of military equipment, hastily buried valuables, and construction materials from buildings demolished to strengthen defensive positions, indicating the desperation of the defenders and the intensity of the military pressure they faced. Byzantine control of Ligurian territories following the Gothic Wars brought new administrative systems that attempted to restore imperial authority while adapting to the changed conditions that characterized post-classical Mediterranean civilization. The establishment of the Exarchate of Ravenna created new administrative structures that connected Ligurian communities to Constantinople rather than Rome, fundamentally altering political relationships that had defined the region's position within imperial systems for over 6 centuries. Byzantine officials implemented taxation systems designed to support military operations while funding the reconstruction of damaged infrastructure. But these policies often conflicted with local economic capabilities that had been severely reduced by decades of warfare and disruption. The construction of new fortifications at strategic locations throughout Ligurian territory reflected Byzantine military priorities that emphasized the defense of coastal strongholds and mountain passes that could control access to Italian territories. The fortress constructed at Porto during the mid-6th century incorporated advanced Byzantine military engineering techniques, including Greek fire installations, sophisticated siege defense systems, and underground supply networks that could sustain prolonged defensive operations. These installations required substantial investments in both construction and maintenance that strained local resources while providing enhanced security against future barbarian incursions. The Lombard invasion of northern Italy beginning in 568 AD created new political realities that would fundamentally alter the character of Ligurian society and mark the definitive end of classical Roman civilization in the region. Lombard forces, operating with greater strategic coordination than previous barbarian raiders, systematically occupied key strongholds and transportation routes while establishing permanent settlements that displaced existing populations and imposed new social structures based on Germanic tribal traditions. The speed and effectiveness of Lombard military operations demonstrated their superior understanding of Italian geographical conditions and their ability to exploit the weaknesses in Byzantine defensive arrangements. The establishment of Lombard duchies in northern Italy created political boundaries that divided traditional Ligurian territories between competing authorities while introducing Germanic legal systems and social structures that conflicted with established Roman administrative traditions. The Duchy of Genua, established under Lombard authority around 575 AD, encompassed much of the traditional coastal region while implementing new legal codes that recognized Germanic concepts of personal law alongside remnants of Roman civil law that continued to govern certain commercial and property relationships. This legal pluralism created complex jurisdictional situations that required careful negotiation between different cultural traditions and legal authorities. The preservation of Roman institutions under successive barbarian kingdoms reflected both the practical value of established administrative systems and the limited capacity of Germanic rulers to completely replace complex bureaucratic structures that had evolved over centuries of imperial development. Lombard administrators retained many aspects of Roman taxation, legal procedures, and urban organisation while adapting these systems to accommodate Germanic social structures and military requirements. The continuity of Roman architectural traditions, construction techniques, and urban planning concepts demonstrated the persistence of classical cultural elements even under radically different political arrangements. The transformation of Roman villa estates into fortified manor houses marked a fundamental shift in rural social organisation that would characterise medieval development throughout the region. These new residential complexes combined defensive capabilities with agricultural management functions, creating self-sufficient economic units that could survive periods of political instability while maintaining control over surrounding agricultural territories. The archaeological investigation of villa sites throughout coastal Liguria reveals systematic modifications during the 6th and 7th centuries that converted classical, residential architecture into fortified compounds capable of withstanding military attacks while housing extended household communities including agricultural workers, craftsmen, and military retainers. The development of monastic communities during this transitional period provided alternative social structures that preserved classical learning and administrative expertise while adapting to the changed political conditions of the post-imperial period. The monastery established at San Frutuoso around 580 AD combined traditional Christian religious practices with practical economic activities including agriculture, manuscript copying and craft production that maintained connections to classical cultural traditions while serving the spiritual needs of local populations. These institutions often served as repositories for Roman legal documents, technical knowledge, and literary works that would otherwise have been lost during the disruptions of the transitional period. The gradual emergence of maritime republics during the 7th and 8th centuries represented the culmination of processes that had begun during the late imperial period as coastal communities developed autonomous political institutions that could function independently of distant royal or imperial authorities. The proto-communal organisations that emerged in Genoa and other ports combined elements of Roman municipal government with Germanic legal traditions and Christian institutional structures, creating hybrid political systems that would eventually evolve into the distinctive governmental forms that characterised medieval Italian city-states. These developments established the foundations for the remarkable commercial and political achievements that would define Ligurian civilization during the subsequent medieval period, when the region would emerge as one of the most dynamic and influential areas of European development. The collapse of centralised Lombard authority following Charlemagne's conquest in 774 AD created unprecedented opportunities for coastal Ligurian communities to assert greater autonomy over their commercial and political affairs, as the Carolingian administrative system proved inadequate for controlling distant maritime territories that generated substantial revenues through Mediterranean trade networks. The gradual weakening of imperial oversight during the 9th century enabled port cities to develop independent institutions that would eventually coalesce into the distinctive governmental structures characteristic of medieval maritime republics, with Genoa emerging as the preeminent example of this political evolution through its strategic exploitation of commercial opportunities created by the fragmentation of centralised authority. The emergence of consular government in Genoa around 1096 AD marked the formal establishment of communal institutions that had been developing informally for over a century, as merchant families assumed greater responsibility for municipal administration, harbour management, and commercial regulation. The first documented consuls, Ido and Enrico della Volta, represented established trading dynasties whose wealth derived from systematic exploitation of commercial routes connecting northern Italy with Byzantine territories, North African markets, and the emerging Crusader states of the Eastern Mediterranean. Their election by assemblies of prominent citizens demonstrated the development of quasi-democratic institutions that balance competing merchant interests while providing effective governance for increasingly complex urban communities. The construction of Genua's first communal palace during the early 12th century symbolised the city's transformation from a provincial port under distant royal authority to an autonomous political entity capable of conducting independent diplomatic relations with foreign powers. The building's architectural design incorporated defensive features including thick stone walls, narrow windows positioned for optimal defensive fire, and secure storage areas for municipal archives and treasury reserves, reflecting the constant military threats that characterised medieval Italian politics. The palace's location adjacent to the cathedral emphasised the integration of secular and religious authority that legitimised communal government while maintaining connections to broader Christian civilization. The development of distinctive Ligurian naval technologies during this period reflected both the region's maritime traditions and the specific tactical requirements of Mediterranean commerce and warfare during the 11th and 12th centuries. Genoese shipbuilders pioneered the construction of specialised merchant galleys that combined the speed and manoeuvrability necessary for military operations with the cargo capacity required for profitable commercial voyages. These vessels, typically measuring between 30 and 40 metres in length, featured innovative hull designs that reduced water resistance while maintaining structural integrity under the stresses of both combat operations and heavy cargo loads. The galley workshops established along Genua's waterfront incorporated advanced construction techniques that enabled rapid production of standardized vessels using prefabricated components manufactured in specialized facilities throughout the city's expanding industrial districts. Master shipwrights developed systematic approaches to hull construction that reduced building times while maintaining quality standards, with individual galleys typically requiring 6 to 8 months for completion, using teams of skilled craftsmen working according to carefully coordinated production schedules. The standardization of design elements enabled efficient maintenance and repair operations while ensuring that replacement vessels could be quickly constructed when losses occurred during military campaigns or commercial expeditions. The innovation of the compass rose navigation system by Ligurian navigators during the 12th century revolutionized Mediterranean seamanship by providing reliable directional references that enabled accurate course plotting during extended voyages beyond sight of familiar coastlines. Genoese navigators developed detailed charts that incorporated magnetic compass readings with traditional coastal landmarks, creating comprehensive navigation aids that enabled merchant vessels to maintain regular schedules despite adverse weather conditions or seasonal variations in wind patterns. These technical advances provided Ligurian merchants with significant competitive advantages over rivals who continued to rely on traditional navigation methods that limited their operational capabilities to familiar coastal routes. The establishment of systematic banking operations in Genoa during the late 11th century created financial institutions that could support the capital requirements of long-distance commerce while providing secure storage and transfer services for the substantial wealth generated by successful trading ventures. The first documented banking contracts date to 1087 AD, when prominent merchant families began offering credit services to finance commercial expeditions while charging standardized interest rates that reflected both the risks involved and the potential profits available from successful ventures. These early banking operations evolved rapidly to include currency exchange services, international money transfers, and investment partnerships that enabled the mobilization of capital resources on scales that had not been achieved since the collapse of imperial financial systems. The development of double-entry bookkeeping systems by Genoese merchants provided essential tools for managing the complex financial relationships that characterized medieval international commerce. These accounting innovations enabled precise tracking of assets, liabilities, and profit margins across multiple simultaneous business ventures, while providing the documentation necessary for legal dispute resolution and partnership negotiations. The systematic record-keeping practices developed during this period established standards that would influence commercial practices throughout Europe, while creating archives that provide detailed insights into the operational methods and financial capabilities of medieval maritime republics. The First Crusade presented Ligurian maritime republics with unprecedented opportunities to expand their commercial networks, while demonstrating their naval capabilities to potential allies and competitors throughout the Mediterranean world. Genoese fleets provided crucial transportation services for crusader armies, while establishing permanent commercial installations in newly conquered territories that would serve as bases for subsequent trading operations. The Siege of Antioch in 1098 AD demonstrated the effectiveness of Ligurian naval support, with Genoese vessels maintaining supply lines that proved essential for the ultimate success of the Crusader campaign, while securing commercial privileges that would generate substantial revenues for decades. The establishment of Genoese commercial quarters in Acre, Tyre, and other Crusader ports created permanent installations that combined residential facilities for merchant communities with warehouses, workshops, and administrative offices necessary for conducting large-scale international trade. These installations typically occupied entire city districts with their own walls, gates, and internal governance structures that enabled Ligurian merchants to maintain their cultural identity while operating within foreign political environments. The commercial privileges negotiated with Crusader authorities included exemptions from local taxation, independent judicial authority over internal disputes, and exclusive trading rights for specific commodities that provided substantial competitive advantages over rival merchant communities. The expansion of Ligurian commercial networks into the Black Sea region during the 12th century opened access to luxury goods from Central Asia and Eastern Europe that commanded premium prices in Western European markets. Genoese merchants established permanent trading posts in Kaffa, Trebizond and other Black Sea ports that served as collection points for furs, spices, silk and precious metals flowing westward along traditional caravan routes. The profits generated by these eastern trading operations provided capital for further commercial expansion, while enabling Ligurian merchants to compete effectively against Venetian and Pisan rivals who had previously dominated Mediterranean luxury trade. The development of systematic colonial administration in Ligurian overseas territories reflected the evolution of governmental institutions that could effectively manage distant possessions while maintaining political control over diverse populations. The podesta system implemented in Genoese colonies combined military authority with commercial administration, creating unified command structures that could respond rapidly to both external threats and internal challenges. Colonial governors typically served 2-year terms with extensive powers over local affairs while remaining accountable to communal authorities in Genoa through regular reporting requirements and financial audits that ensured colonial operations served metropolitan interests. The construction of fortified commercial installations throughout the eastern Mediterranean demonstrated Ligurian engineering capabilities while providing secure bases for trading operations in politically unstable regions. The fortress warehouse complex constructed at Kaffa during the 13th century featured massive stone walls with integrated defensive towers, extensive underground storage facilities, and residential quarters for permanent merchant communities. The installation's design incorporated lessons learned from previous military experiences while adapting to local environmental conditions, including seismic activity and extreme weather patterns that characterize Black Sea coastal regions. The rivalry between Genoa and Pisa for control of Mediterranean commercial routes generated a series of military conflicts that demonstrated the naval capabilities developed by Ligurian maritime republics, while establishing their position as major powers capable of projecting military force throughout the Mediterranean basin. The Battle of Meloria in 1284 AD marked the decisive defeat of Pisan naval forces by a Genoese fleet that employed innovative tactical formations and superior vessel designs to achieve overwhelming victory despite facing numerically superior opponents. The battle's outcome eliminated Pisa as a serious competitor for Mediterranean commerce, while establishing Genoese naval supremacy that would persist for over a century. The evolution of communal government in Genoa from consular to podesta systems reflected the growing complexity of municipal administration, as the city's commercial success generated increasing wealth and political influence that required more sophisticated institutional structures. The appointment of foreign podesta beginning in 1190 AD represented attempts to reduce factional conflicts between competing merchant families while providing experienced administrators capable of managing increasingly complex urban affairs. These professional administrators typically served 1-year terms with extensive executive powers, while remaining accountable to communal assemblies that retained ultimate authority over major policy decisions. The development of specialized guilds representing different aspects of maritime commerce created institutional frameworks that could regulate trade practices, maintain quality standards, and coordinate collective responses to external challenges. The guild system that emerged during the 12th century encompassed organizations representing shipbuilders, navigators, merchants specializing in different commodities, and various support services including banking, insurance, and legal representation. These institutions provided social welfare services for their members while maintaining the professional standards necessary for international commercial success in highly competitive markets. The establishment of systematic diplomatic relations with foreign powers demonstrated the emergence of Ligurian maritime republics as independent political entities capable of conducting autonomous foreign policy while maintaining beneficial relationships with traditional overlords. Genoese diplomatic missions to Constantinople, Cairo, and other major centres negotiated commercial agreements, resolved disputes, and coordinated military cooperation that served mutual interests while advancing specific Ligurian objectives. The diplomatic protocols developed during this period incorporated both traditional medieval practices and innovative approaches that reflected the unique circumstances of maritime commercial republics operating within complex international political environments. The construction of extensive harbour facilities in Genua during the 12th and 13th centuries created port installations capable of accommodating the largest merchant fleets operating in Mediterranean commerce while providing specialised services that enhanced the city's competitive position. The artificial harbour basin excavated during the 1280s could accommodate over 300 vessels simultaneously while providing protected anchorages that remained operational during severe weather conditions that closed other Mediterranean ports. The harbour's design incorporated advanced hydraulic engineering that maintained proper water depths through systematic dredging while preventing silting that had plagued earlier installations. The development of maritime insurance systems by Ligurian merchants created financial instruments that enabled the assumption of commercial risks on scales that would have been impossible for individual investors while providing security that encouraged expanded trading operations. Early insurance contracts dating to the late 12th century established standardized procedures for assessing risks, calculating premiums, and processing claims that provided reliable protection against the numerous hazards that threatened medieval commercial ventures. These financial innovations spread throughout European commercial centres, while generating substantial revenues for Ligurian insurance providers who possess superior knowledge of Mediterranean trading conditions and risk factors. The expansion of Ligurian influence into Western Mediterranean regions brought Genoese merchants into direct competition with Catalonian and Provençal traders, while opening new markets for manufactured goods and raw materials that supported continued economic growth. Commercial installations established in Barcelona, Marseille, and other Western ports provided bases for trading operations, while creating networks that connected diverse regional economies through systematic exchange relationships. The profits generated by Western Mediterranean trade enabled further expansion while providing resources necessary for maintaining the military capabilities required to protect far-flung commercial interests against increasingly sophisticated competitors. The transformation of medieval Ligurian maritime power into the modern Italian region of Liguria represents a complex process of cultural preservation and adaptation that has maintained distinctive regional characteristics while integrating into broader national and European frameworks. The linguistic landscape of contemporary Liguria preserves remarkable traces of ancient Ligurian substrate languages that survived millennia of Celtic, Roman, Germanic, and Romance linguistic influences, with place names throughout the region continuing to reflect pre-Indo-European naming patterns that connect modern communities to their prehistoric origins. Villages bearing names with characteristic suffixes such as Asco, Aska, Usco, and Osco dot the mountainous interior, while coastal settlements preserve toponymic elements that reflect both ancient Ligurian maritime traditions and subsequent historical layers of cultural development. The Ligurian dialect spoken throughout the region today maintains phonetic characteristics and grammatical structures that distinguish it clearly from surrounding Romance languages, while preserving elements that linguists have identified as potential survivals from ancient substrate languages. The distinctive pronunciation patterns found in Genovese and other regional dialects include consonant clusters and vowel systems that differ significantly from Standard Italian, while sharing certain features with other Western Romance languages that suggest common origins in pre-Roman linguistic traditions. Systematic dialectological research conducted throughout the 20th century has documented hundreds of lexical items that appear to derive from ancient Ligurian roots, particularly terms related to maritime activities, mountain agriculture, and traditional crafts that maintained continuity across successive periods of political and cultural transformation. Archaeological heritage preservation throughout modern Liguria has created an extensive network of sites and museums that make ancient Ligurian history accessible to both scholarly research and public education while protecting irreplaceable cultural resources for future generations. The Museo Archeologico del Finale houses one of Europe's most comprehensive collections of prehistoric Ligurian artifacts, including materials from Castellaro culture sites that demonstrate the sophisticated technological and artistic achievements of Bronze Age communities. The museum's displays incorporate interactive technologies that enable visitors to experience reconstructed ancient environments while providing detailed information about archaeological methodologies and interpretive frameworks that continue to evolve as new discoveries expand understanding of prehistoric Ligurian civilization. The prehistoric rock art complexes of the Maritime Alps, including the UNESCO World Heritage Site at Montebello, preserve thousands of petroglyphs created by ancient Ligurian communities over a period spanning nearly 3 millennia. These remarkable archaeological landscapes continue to yield new discoveries as systematic survey work identifies previously unknown carving sites, while advanced documentation techniques create detailed records that enable comparative analysis with similar rock art traditions throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. The preservation of these sites requires ongoing collaboration between Italian and French authorities, as the ancient sacred landscapes transcend modern political boundaries and reflect the territorial extent of prehistoric Ligurian cultural influence. Underwater archaeological investigations along the Ligurian coast have revealed extensive evidence of ancient maritime activities that demonstrate the continuity of seafaring traditions from prehistoric times through the medieval period. Shipwrecks dating from the Roman period through the Renaissance provide insights into evolving naval technologies, commercial networks, and cultural exchanges that shaped regional development, while illustrating the persistent importance of maritime activities in Ligurian economic and social life. The underwater archaeological park established near Portofino protects several significant wreck sites, while providing controlled access for research and educational activities that connect contemporary visitors with the region's maritime heritage. Contemporary archaeological excavations continue to expand understanding of ancient Ligurian civilization through systematic investigation of settlement sites, religious installations, and industrial complexes that reveal previously unknown aspects of prehistoric and historical development. Recent excavations at Castellaro di Bergeghi have uncovered evidence of sophisticated metalworking operations that produced both utilitarian tools and luxury items for regional and international markets, demonstrating the technological capabilities and commercial connections of Iron Age Ligurian communities. These discoveries challenge traditional assumptions about the isolation and technological limitations of ancient mountain populations, while revealing the complex cultural dynamics that characterized pre-Roman Ligurian society. Epigraphic studies of inscriptions discovered throughout former Ligurian territories provide crucial evidence for understanding the linguistic characteristics, religious practices, and social organization of ancient communities, while documenting the gradual processes of Romanization that transformed regional culture during the imperial period. The corpus of Ligurian inscriptions, though relatively small compared to other ancient Italian languages, includes texts that preserve unique linguistic features and cultural information unavailable from literary sources. Recent discoveries of inscribed materials from sanctuary sites and urban excavations continue to expand this corpus, while providing new insights into the persistence of indigenous cultural elements within Romanized provincial society. Interdisciplinary research programs that combine archaeological investigation with genetic studies, environmental analysis, and historical linguistics are revolutionizing understanding of ancient Ligurian population dynamics and cultural development. DNA analysis of skeletal remains from prehistoric and historical burial sites has revealed complex patterns of population continuity and migration that challenge traditional models of cultural change, while providing evidence for the biological relationships between ancient and modern regional populations. These studies indicate substantial genetic continuity between prehistoric Ligurian populations and contemporary inhabitants of the region, suggesting that cultural transformations occurred primarily through adaptation and acculturation, rather than wholesale population replacement. Environmental archaeology and paleoclimatic studies have reconstructed the changing ecological conditions that influence Ligurian settlement patterns, economic activities, and cultural development across millennia of regional history. Pollen analysis from sediment cores extracted from mountain lakes and coastal marshes provides detailed records of vegetation changes that reflect both natural climatic variations and human impacts on regional ecosystems. These environmental reconstructions demonstrate how ancient Ligurian communities adapted their subsistence strategies and settlement locations to accommodate changing ecological conditions while maintaining cultural continuity across periods of significant environmental stress. The influence of ancient Ligurian maritime traditions on modern regional identity remains clearly visible in the continued importance of shipping and commercial activities that connect Liguria to global economic networks while maintaining distinctive regional characteristics. The port of Genoa ranks among Europe's largest and most technologically advanced commercial installations, handling container traffic that connects Mediterranean markets with global supply chains while maintaining specialized facilities for luxury yacht construction and maintenance that reflect traditional regional expertise in maritime technologies. The shipbuilding industries concentrated around Genoa and La Spezia continue to produce vessels that incorporate advanced technologies with design traditions that trace their origins to medieval innovations in galley construction and navigation systems. Modern Ligurian maritime companies maintain global commercial networks that echo the trading relationships established by medieval maritime republics while adapting to contemporary economic conditions and technological requirements. The Grimaldi shipping lines, founded by a family that traces its origins to medieval Genoese merchant dynasties, operates ferry services and cargo routes throughout the Mediterranean while maintaining headquarters in Genoa that symbolize the continuity of regional maritime traditions. These companies employ thousands of regional residents while generating substantial revenues that support continued investment in port facilities and maritime technologies that maintain Liguria's competitive position in international shipping markets. The development of cultural tourism throughout Liguria has created economic opportunities that celebrate regional heritage while providing sustainable alternatives to traditional industrial activities that face increasing competition from global markets. The Cinque Terre National Park attracts millions of visitors annually to experience landscapes and communities that preserve traditional agricultural and architectural practices while adapting to contemporary tourism demands. These coastal villages maintain terraced vineyards and olive groves that employ cultivation techniques developed over centuries of intensive agriculture in challenging mountain environments, creating cultural landscapes that demonstrate the continuity of traditional land use practices within modern economic frameworks. Historical preservation efforts throughout the region have created extensive networks of protected sites, museums, and cultural institutions that maintain connections to ancient heritage while serving contemporary educational and economic functions. The restoration of medieval fortifications, Renaissance palaces, and traditional architectural complexes provides employment for skilled craftsmen while preserving building techniques and artistic traditions that connect modern communities to their historical origins. These preservation projects often reveal archaeological evidence that expands understanding of regional development while creating opportunities for public engagement with historical research and cultural interpretation. The role of Ligurian history in contemporary Italian national narratives reflects both the region's distinctive cultural characteristics and its contributions to broader Italian political and economic development. The medieval maritime republics are celebrated as early examples of democratic governance and commercial innovation that anticipated later developments in Italian unification and economic modernization. Educational curricula throughout Italy include substantial coverage of Ligurian contributions to exploration, trade, and cultural development, while emphasizing the region's role in connecting Italian territories to broader Mediterranean and global networks. Regional cultural institutions continue to promote research and public understanding of Ligurian heritage through academic programs, publications, and cultural events that maintain scholarly engagement with historical topics while making research accessible to broader audiences. The Società Ligure di Storia Patria, founded in the 19th century, continues to publish scholarly research while organising conferences and exhibitions that bring together international experts with local communities interested in regional history. These institutions provide crucial support for ongoing research, while ensuring that new discoveries and interpretative developments reach both academic audiences and interested members of the general public. Contemporary Ligurian identity incorporates pride in ancient heritage, with recognition of the region's continued importance in modern Italian and European development, creating cultural frameworks that value historical continuity while embracing innovation and adaptation. Regional festivals and cultural celebrations often incorporate references to ancient traditions while addressing contemporary concerns and opportunities, demonstrating the dynamic relationship between historical consciousness and modern regional identity. The annual Regata Storica in Genoa recreates medieval naval traditions while celebrating contemporary maritime achievements, creating cultural events that connect past and present while promoting regional tourism and cultural pride. The preservation and interpretation of ancient Ligurian heritage continues to evolve as new archaeological discoveries, improved analytical techniques, and changing interpretive frameworks expand understanding of regional development while challenging traditional assumptions about ancient Mediterranean civilizations. Recent discoveries of prehistoric art sites, Roman industrial installations, and medieval commercial facilities demonstrate that significant aspects of Ligurian history remain to be discovered, while existing knowledge continues to be refined through improved research methodologies and interdisciplinary collaboration. The legacy of ancient Ligurian civilization thus persists not merely as historical curiosity, but as a living cultural foundation that continues to influence regional identity, economic activities, and social institutions throughout modern Liguria. From the prehistoric petroglyphs that crown alpine peaks to the bustling commercial ports that connect the region to global markets, the accumulated heritage of millennia of human adaptation to challenging Mediterranean environments provides both inspiration and practical guidance for contemporary communities facing their own challenges of cultural preservation and economic development. The remarkable resilience demonstrated by Ligurian communities throughout their long history offers valuable lessons for modern societies seeking to maintain cultural distinctiveness, while participating effectively in increasingly interconnected global systems, ensuring that the legacy of this ancient civilization continues to enrich human understanding and achievement for generations to come.